over a desk, and he bolts out of the classroom. Well, subsequently, the desk hits another student. So the principal is called. Ryan is found in the hallway, crying, sobbing. He's called down to the office. And of course, we go through the rigors, and we know what happens. Ryan gets suspended for 3 days. It's typical, right? Happens all across our country. But what we found out when Ryan was asked what happened, what's causing this behavior, he was really reluctant, as most third graders are. He couldn't articulate himself. He couldn't express himself. Well, Ryan is expelled, as I said. He's expended. Mom comes to the school, and she discloses what she didn't want to have to disclose. And if you can imagine, horribly, Ryan was molested by a man named Ed. So if we're not curious, if we're not continuously curious, we're going to miss students like that. As I look around the room, some of us are left now, but I think at some point there was about 2,000 years of experience in this classroom. But if we're not careful, if we're not curious, no matter with all that experience, we're going to continue to miss students like Ryan, if we're not curious. So more than anything, I want to share with you that we should be curious with the children that we work with every day. My name is Will Weeks. I'm a resilience coach for Star Commonwealth. I've been in that role now for roughly 4 years. And prior to doing that work, I've worked as a teacher assistant, building substitute teacher, assistant teacher, and finally dean of students. But nothing gives me as much joy as being the father of Cleo, Clinton, and Joshua. So that's why I'm here. That's what gives me the motivation to do this work. So today's agenda, we're going to talk about focusing on resilience, understanding trauma as an experience. We're going to talk about how we can foster emotional regulation and connection. Next, we're going to talk about prioritizing social emotional skill development. And lastly, how we can establish safety through social emotional learning. And we must remember that stressed brains can't learn, okay? STAR provides a wide array of services for children, families, communities, and professionals, from prevention and intervention to enrichment and residential treatment. All of our trauma-informed, resilience-based programs are rooted on creating powerful and positive experiences for all to heal and for all to thrive. Since about 1913, we've been doing this work. We identify and assess the impacts of toxic stress and trauma on children and design and implement interventions that build resilience, heal pain, and create new pathways to success and opportunity. Then we teach others what we know and what works. We've had over 100 years of working with youth and 30 years of sharing our experience or expertise with social workers, counselors, teachers, schools, and educators like yourselves. With direct services across Michigan and professional training and coaching in all 50 states and over 60 countries, we are driven to heal. So as you know, we are always pursuing partnerships. I won't read from the script right now. I was excited to hear about this opportunity because I just get excited when I hear about a chance to share the work that we do with educators like yourself, because I think that everyone that works with students needs this training, needs this information. So if you see any alignment with the work that we do, please reach out to us. We want to work with you. I opened up talking about being curious. I want to spend a moment now talking about self-care. And I know it's a little bit of a buzzword now, right? We hear it so much everywhere we go. Self-care, take care of yourself. But I'm going to open with this. I'm going to also close with this. But I want to share at this moment right now, it's so important that we develop a self-care strategy. I'm going to talk briefly about a green ticket item and a red ticket item. A green ticket item is something that you do every day. It might be a hot bath. It might be a glass of wine when you go home. It might be watching your favorite show. It might be Netflix. But a red ticket item is something that's a little bit more in depth. It might be a massage. It might be a date night, whatever, you name it. But we should develop those, because when we show up for them, we're better poised to show up for ourselves. We're better poised to show up for them, okay? As I mentioned, we've been in this role now, Star Commonwealth has, for about 100 years. And Floyd Starr, along with his wife and beautiful daughter, started an orphanage in 1913 with just 2 young boys. He started that orphanage on the border of Albion and Marshall, Michigan. And since that time, our campus has grown from 2 boys to a sprawling 250 acre campus where we now are housing children from Afghanistan who have been displaced due to that event there. So we're committed then, and we're committed now. So I want to ask a question, and you know the answer, so I'm going to answer it anyway. What is the absolute best place to impact children? And we know why, right? We know why. Because they spend more time with us than they do with their parents. They're with us from roughly 8 in the morning to sometimes 8 at night with extracurricular activity. So we know that. And we know also that sometimes trauma happens at home. So because of this, there's been a resounding clarion call to action. The National Center for Traumatic Stress Network is now asking schools and districts to play a key role in addressing the needs of traumatized children. And why? I'll tell you why. Over half of the nation's children have experienced at least one or more types of serious childhood trauma, nearly 35 million. 1/3 of children have experienced 2 or more types of childhood adversity. 15% of all girls ages 14 through 17 have experienced sexual assault. 1/3 of students have been bullied, and nearly 2/3 of students 17 years or younger have been exposed to crime, violence, and abuse. And nearly 1/3 of students in our inner city schools have witnessed a stabbing or shooting, and that's really troubling. Next and last, nearly 16 million children in the United States live at or below the poverty level. Nearly 6 million of them are under the age of 6. And I don't like to assume, but I think it's safe to assume in this moment that it's likely gotten worse after COVID-19. Trauma is any experience that leaves a person feeling hopeless, helpless, fearing for their life, survival, or their safety. This experience can be real or perceived. I want to share a story with you. There's a sad, and we talked about YouTube a moment ago, and this is being streamed on YouTube. I love YouTube, I'm sorry. I go there for finding out how to tie bow ties to fixing my favorite recipes, but I just simply love it. But there's a video on YouTube of a wonderful young lady. She's about 3 years old. And if you're like me, as I showed you my beautiful children, I think they're beautiful, I think you do too. I showed you my beautiful children. I showed you my children. So when I was 10 years old, we had a birthday party. I had my 10th year old birthday party. I had a pack of hot dogs, a birthday cake, Keith Williams, David Thompson, and some ice cream. That was it. That was my birthday party. But when I became a father, it became more elaborate. Jeepers, Chuck E. Cheese, you name it. And if anyone, do we have Chuck E. Cheese here in North Carolina? Right? Horrible pizza, a great time though, right? Okay. But with that said, I was at Chuck E. Cheese for my, not myself, but this wonderful girl was at Chuck E. Cheese. She appeared to be about 3 years old, okay? And so her family is there. They're having a great time. They're going through the motions. They're singing and having a great time, as I mentioned. When all of a sudden the mascot enters the classroom, and you know what it is. It's a large rat, right? He's about 6 feet tall, and the girl begins to lose it. She's crying, she's hysterical. And why? Because, why is a large rat about to attack her? But her family is laughing, of course, to her dismay, and she's crying, she's bawling her heart out. But to her, this is real. It's not a fake mouse, it's not a man in a costume, it's a real rat about to attack her. So perception is everything. To her, it seemed real. So I want you to keep that in mind as we progress through this training, that trauma can be perceived or real. For her, it was very real. We got to keep that in mind. So we begin here. We cannot talk about trauma without talking about resilience. And what is resilience? We got to keep in mind that we can't take away things like what happened to that young lady that was 3 years old. We can't stop what happened to many of our students that's happening in their homes, in their communities, but we can make it a little bit better in school. Because resilience equals hope. So let's talk about step 1. We're going to talk about focusing on resilience. Resilience is the ability to achieve positive outcomes mentally, emotionally, socially, and spiritually, despite adversity. This comes with 4 main protective factors for resilient children. And we all need these, no matter where we come from. And one of those is a supportive adult-child relationship. Another is a sense of self-efficacy and perceived control. Next, adaptive skills and self-regulatory capacities. And lastly, sources of faith, hope, and cultural traditions. Now keep those in mind. We'll come back to those, please. So right now, I'm going to talk about the Circle of Courage. And the Circle of Courage is a model of resilience we will learn more about today. This model of resilience will help us assess and work with children to support how they may have been impacted by toxic stress and how we can restore and nurture their own resilience. The Circle of Courage is based on the belief that all humans have 4 universal needs. And I'm gonna take a moment now just to share this video, and I'm hoping it works. I know these guys take great care of me, so I'm in great hands with Deanna. So I'm gonna click that now. Please work.
With the Circle of Courage, you begin with the question, what is it that children need? And we've tried to identify those things and label them belonging, mastery, independence, and generosity.
All those children have these needs to belong, to master, to be independent, and to be of some value to one another. And if those needs aren't met, the circle is broken. And when the circle is broken, we will spend a great deal of energy working with those young people, whether we understand what we're doing or not.
Remember that this child is sacred, wakam. And that's the task that you have as a teacher or as a staff member in a residential facility. You're dealing with a real person, with a real inner world. And if you can connect with that real world of that child, you have the potential to really provide the education that made all of us go into the field in the first place.
So the 3 men you saw there were the creators of the Circle of Courage. And let's go back to those 4 factors that we talked about a moment ago. So who can remember those 4 protective factors? I know it was just a moment ago. I'm testing you, educators, like you always test our children. I love it. Yes, anyone else? Another one? I won't test you too much. So it's been a long day, and it's been a great day. The supportive adult-child relationship was one, as you mentioned. With that, we foster belonging. The next was a sense of self-efficacy and perceived control. With that, there's mastery. And not getting them all right, not absolute mastery, but progress. It's progress of, today you have, last week you had 5 fights, Franklin. This week you only had 2. That's progress. We should celebrate that. And next, adaptive skills and self-regulatory capacities is the mark of true independence, the ability to maintain self-control under stressful situations. And lastly, as I mentioned, the sources of faith, hope, and cultural traditions fosters generosity. Where there's belonging, there's the presence of a strong sense of belonging makes young people more receptive to guidance from other community members. And even if parents or caregivers are struggling, there are others there to help, right? We know what that's like. We know what that's like with our children. We know that when they have a strong sense of belonging, and I heard Dr. Hargrave say earlier, and I was struck by what he said, when he talked about how as a 3rd grader, he walked into the classroom, into the school, and that educator said, "Hello, you're Ronald Hargraves." Well, that's belonging. That's belonging, everyone. And we need to increase that in our schools that we work in. Next, there's mastery. And the goal for mastery should be to achieve one's potential and then contribute to and provide for the greater community. It's not about getting a big Cadillac, but it's about getting where we need to be and then helping others. That's what true mastery should be. In contrast to obedience models of discipline, teaching should be designed to build respect and teach inner discipline. Children should be encouraged to make decisions, solve problems, and show personal responsibility, to learn and practice emotional awareness and regulation. We should give students choices, right? Choices with homework assignments, choices with how they present their presentation. Should it be oral? Should it be verbal? Or should it be written? Or should it be a poem? Giving them choices empowers them, and it fosters independence. And lastly, in helping others, we create our own proof of worthiness, for we have the power to make positive contributions to the world. When children have an opportunity to share with others, they really find out what their self-worth is all about. Now, we talked about the importance of focusing on resilience. Let's discuss now how we can understand trauma as an experience. Okay, we know with circles, sometimes they become broken. And we know how they become broken, right? We've heard some stories this morning. They become broken many ways. Displacement, foster care, death in the family, fires, you name it, it happens. Our children see it. They all add up to trauma. We can experience trauma in many ways. The causes of trauma are less important than how trauma manifests in the client's life. It's important that we understand we can experience trauma in many ways. I want to ask your forgiveness. I didn't make you aware of this, but if this is troubling for some of you, I apologize. Many of us may know what this is. This is the actual picture of the World Trade Center. You may be like me in that you know where you were on that day when that happened. I was getting out of my vehicle. I was in Livonia, Michigan. I was going to Home Depot when I heard that the second plane had hit the World Trade Center. And because I'm a veteran, all sorts of thoughts went through my mind. I thought about, wow, we're going to go back to war. Wow, those people are in that building. People are dying in that building. So because of that, trauma is a somatic experience. It's a body experience, like I depicted with the young lady earlier. It lives in us. So no matter where you were, you remember that day. Our students see this in the same way sometimes. What they experienced last year and a half, many of our children witnessed the murder of George Floyd on TV. They've got to live through that trauma. It's in their minds. It doesn't go away. We can also be a witness to trauma via a personal witness, domestic violence, police, and fire, or we can be related to. I met a friend earlier today that shared with me that her wonderful sister has cancer. And we know that an individual doesn't have cancer, their entire family has cancer, right? So again, that's another example of how we can be related to trauma through our siblings and so on and so forth. And lastly, we can experience trauma by listening to it. And as educators, you know this better than I do. We hear some sad stories, don't we? We do. So those are just some ways. Video games, movies, it happens. We have to know that it can be exposed. We can be exposed to trauma in many different ways. There are 3 types of trauma. And the first one is type 1, of course, and it's a single exposure. It may be an exposure to a fire, an assault, domestic violence. Now, type 2 is different in that they're either exposure to 2 types of trauma, 2 different types of trauma, or more than one exposure to the same type of trauma. For example, you may be exposed to domestic violence and then a fire, or just more than one act of domestic violence. Lastly, we have toxic stress and developmental trauma disorder. This is stress that is so prevalent that if you ask a child what's going on in their lives, they'll say, nothing. It's normal. It's every day for me. Now, I want to talk about developmental trauma disorder. It's a proposed diagnosis to help us understand the symptoms and reactions children experience when they have grown and developed in a constant state of stress and trauma. Robert Paynoose and Bessel van der Kolk in 2005, 9, and 13, with no success, proposed this. It's still under review. It's just something to consider, okay? Trauma-informed resilient schools understand the impact stress and trauma have on children's bodies and their ability to regulate emotions, behavior, and ultimately learn. Trauma-informed resilient schools recognize the strong and significant correlation between trauma and low academic achievement. The causes of trauma are less important than how trauma manifests in a client's life. It is important to understand we can experience trauma in many ways, as I've shared. Let's talk about trauma's impact on the brain briefly, and I'll do my best. I am not Dr. Shaylin Soma, our chief clinician, but I'll do my best. I'm trying to make you proud, Chief Dr. Soma. So what we know about brain science now, when I first heard this, of course, it helped kind of like connect some of the pieces, because we know that with our deep brain, I want to use an infant, for example. With an infant, when an infant cries, we know that they have all their 5 senses when they're born. Remarkably, they do. They can hear. If you prick an infant's heel, they do what? They cry, right? And infants can smell their mother's scent from 20 other mothers. Isn't that remarkable? So at birth, all their senses work. They're all in play. Also in play is their affect regulation, and also their memories in play. So if there's a good dance in the beginning with a child in which they cry for whatever reason, if any one of their 5 senses are not being met, and if when they cry, their mother or father or caregiver responds, they learn that my affect memory is going to be taken care of. And my memory is that if I cry, someone's going to help. But with many of the children that we work with, that doesn't happen. That dance doesn't happen. Many times their crying goes unheard, unnurtured. So if that happens over a prolonged period of time, their amygdala becomes really, really overactive. And it's really hard for them to discern when they can come down, when they can regulate their bodies. We see this in our students that we work with every day. Now, this, as I mentioned, this part of the brain is intact in utero. It's intact when they're born. The left part of the brain, or the thinking brain, does not come into later on. And remarkably, as we know, it doesn't come to full fruition or maturity until they're about 25 years of age. So if the right brain is not working correctly, it's going to impact that left brain. And we know that left brain is responsible for so many things: thinking, reasoning, processing, and understanding. And as educators, I know I've asked, and as an educator, I've asked students many times, what were you thinking? And they've said, what? I don't know. I don't know, right? Because they really don't know, not in that moment. You know, I can only equate it to us driving. We all drive here. Most of us drive here, right? We drive. Imagine if you're driving and suddenly someone slams on their brakes in front of you. It happens. You don't stop and say, oh, what am I going to cook for dinner tonight when I get home? No, something kicks in. Your amygdala kicks in, and suddenly all those things that are non-voluntary, they simply kick in. Your heart rate increases. You grasp for the wheel. You might say a few choice cuss words like I do, right? But it's all automatic. It happens. Same thing happens with our children every day that we work with. We got to be mindful of that, how trauma can impact their ability to learn. So keep that in mind when we're asking our students, what were you thinking? Think about yourself being in that vehicle and almost rear-ending it, and think about how you could have expressed yourself in that moment. It was really challenging, right? Really challenging. So why should you be convinced that you and your school becoming trauma-informed, or in this case, your state, your districts, becoming trauma-informed will help students? I'll tell you why. Improved academic achievement and test scores, improved school climate, and we love this one. You know, I've been to so many schools across our country, and you can walk into a school in a moment. And like some of our panel said earlier, it could be the same, it could be schools in the same district, but have a totally different feel, right? You can walk in one high school in the same district, walk in the middle school, and have a totally different feel. And you know, the moment as soon as you walk into the office, you know it, right? It's like, it feels pretty good in this school. Or sometimes you feel like, I don't like the way this school feels. We know it instantly, as soon as we get in that building. So climate is so important. Next, improve teachers' sense of satisfaction and retention. And with today's climate, we need this more than ever. In Michigan, and maybe a problem here in North Carolina, we have a problem getting good teachers right now, educators. It's a real challenge after COVID-19. It really is. Reduce frequency of behavioral outbursts and referrals. Also reduce stress experienced by staff and students. Again, very important. Reduce absences, because we want those kids in school with us, not at home. We want them here with us, don't we? A reduced use of detention and suspension. Reduce bullying, harassment, and fights. And lastly, reduce burden on special education services. Anyone have any idea why this is? Yes. Let's take a look at this. You see this, right? Isn't it staggering? 1 for 1, right? So if we're not careful, we can easily diagnose a child with ADHD who may have traumatic stress symptoms, post-traumatic stress disorder. It happens more than we know. What do trauma-informed resilient schools have in common? 10 steps creating a trauma-informed schools is what they have in common. So part of our primary trainings which are trauma-informed resilient schools and resetting for resilience, one of my favorites. We discuss or go over the 10 steps of creating a trauma-informed schools. The first 6 are covered in trauma-informed resilient schools, focusing on resilience, and lastly, promoting play, establishing safety, fostering connections, and understanding trauma. And the last 4 are part of resetting for resilience. We use all of these to help creating trauma-informed resilient schools. So now about these 10 steps, they're not linear and they're not consecutive. You have to do them one after the other. When we talk and we go into different schools and we do needs assessments and we're coaching, we ask educators to decide where they feel they need to start at, where it's most important, whether it be establishing safety or focusing on resilience. But we ask educators to figure out what they need most, and usually they do. But more than anything, we need to be patient with the process. As I've heard here today, Rome, we know, wasn't built in a day. We need to be patient with the process because it's like a meal wheel. You know, isn't it a wonderful thing as educators when you see your student maybe 2 years later really getting what you've been working on with them for so long? Isn't it wonderful? This process can be the same way. It takes time. So what does being trauma-informed and resilience focused really mean? I apologize. Really focused really mean? What does it mean? What does it mean to be trauma-informed and resilience focused? I'm testing you again. It's not another curriculum. It's what you're already doing, but it's a different mindset. It's just looking at it with a different lens, a more trauma-informed and resilience-focused lens. So it is being curious rather than all-knowing. It is asking or wondering what happened or what is happening in this student's life. What is already right for this student? What are the strengths of this student? Being trauma-informed and resilience-focused is asking what experiences are driving the way this child thinks about themselves and others. What is their private logic? And how does that impact the way they behave? It is wondering, what can I do to support this student most? And what are the new opportunities and experiences I can provide this child to restore and nurture resilience, despite all they have experienced? What is trauma-informed and resilience-focused education? It is not asking what is wrong with this child. And if you're like me, you might have said that before. I forgive you. And you forgive yourselves too, please. We understand now. It's not about what's wrong with them. It's about what happened to them, what's happening to them. It is not labeling. It is not diagnosing without really assessing. And that was me. That child has ADHD. That child has ODD. That child has anger. And sometimes you even hear a child say that. I've got anger issues, Mr. Weeks. I'm really bad. I'm bad. I throw on my cape and I say, no, you're not bad. You may make some bad choices, but you're not bad. Again, the most important thing you hear today is that trauma-informed and resilience-focused education is a mindset. Please keep that in mind. It's not another thing to do. It's simply a mindset. Now, there are tools to put this into play, but more than anything, it's a mindset. The bad news, as we know, is that trauma is a fact. The good news is so is resilience. Trauma is going to be here. We know that. It's going to be here. But with hope, with us being there for them, resilience will be here as well. So we talked about we talked about focusing on resilience. We know a little bit more about trauma now and how it's experienced by our students that we love so much. Let's shift gears now and talk about how we can foster emotional regulation and connection, which is so important with the children that we work with. So school connectedness is the strongest factor in reducing incidents of anxiety, depression, suicide, substance abuse, and violence. A protective factor for all students, regardless of race, ethnicity, and level of family income. The single most common factor for children who develop resilience is at least one stable and committed relationship with a supportive parent, caregiver, or other adult. I want to take a time now just to acknowledge Mr. Simpson, Ms. Hogues. She was my 5th grade teacher. And I want to ask you right now, I know we don't have a lot of time, but I want to take about 15 seconds to ask you just to think about who that person was in your life, who the educator was that made a difference in your life. Mine was Mr. Hamilton. So I'll be quiet and let you think about that for a moment, for about 15 seconds, if you will. Think about the educator who made a difference in your life. That one school person, that one person in school, whether it be a teacher, a social worker, the principal, a coach. Think about them for a moment and think about that impact they had on you. Biz for connection, acts of caring, teaching, learning, and love. Kids learn and grow when meaningful connections are made with adults they can trust. Like a tennis match, serve and return, accept and make bids to connect repeatedly. We know how much stress can change the brain, so does positive experiences. I met an educator years ago, maybe about 8 years ago. He gave me some of the most sound advice I could ever receive. He said to me, don't take it personal. Great advice, right? Don't take it personal. Meaning, when a student rejects your bid for connection, or if a student cusses you out, don't take it personal. Because if it weren't you, it'd be somebody else. They're just trying to find their way. They're trying to find ways to express themselves in a really trying world. So don't take it personal, but always make those bids for connection. And if you're rejected, try again. If you can't make that connection, then tap a friend. Can you connect me with this student? I'm having a hard time connecting with him. He's in my English class and I just can't get through to him. Don't you have a relationship with him? Can you help him with that? So don't take it personal and make those bids for connection relentlessly, over and over again, every day. One thing that we do at Star Commonwealth I'm really proud of is connections assessments. We take an entire school and every student in that entire school, we find a place like this, a media center or a library. We put all their names on tables in the media center. We ask our entire staff to go around and ask them, who do you have a relationship with? Not just a rapport, a real relationship, meaning that you may know their sister, you taught their brother 2 years ago. And you know their mother works at Chrysler, and she also works at CVS to make ends meet, and she's all alone. That's a real relationship. So for everyone where there was no relationship, we went to work. We asked our educators then to, who is free to work with Melissa? Who is free to work with Brad? We put bodies on those students, and we help to make those connections. Now you might be thinking that, wow, sometimes those students that we don't even see throughout the entire school year are the ones that need that connection most. It's that student that you hardly ever see, who's never been in the office at all, but she can go through the entire school year and you never know her name. They need connections too, because they may have experienced trauma and stress as well. My favorite part, 5-to-1 interactions ratio. So who likes it when you go home and you hear the house was dirty, there's no food on the stove, the bathtub is filthy, the kids are all over the place, and oh, by the way, your hair looks terrific. I know, right? Who cares about the hair comment? But let's reverse that, okay? What if it was like this? I love how responsive you guys have been today. You all look so attentive. You're doing such great work. The work that you're doing is really needed. And oh, by the way, someone passed gas. It wasn't so bad with the last one because the first 4 were really great, right? The first 4 were really great. So we got to flip that. I work with a wonderful teacher in Michigan, and she was always engaged in a serious game of whack-a-mole. You guys know what whack-a-mole is, right? With a little bitty hammer and a mallet. So she would be doing things. I would be next door in my office, and I would hear, sit down. Don't do that. Come on over here. Don't hit him. So I went over and offered some support, of course, because that was my job. I'm a resilience coach. So I encouraged her to flip that. Like I encouraged her to look around the room when she did this, because for every time she did that, half of the class was waiting for her attention. They were just doing everything they needed to do, doing all the right things, but she didn't acknowledge them. They were vying for her attention. They were just pleading for them to say, "What about me, teacher? What about me?" But it didn't happen. So I encouraged her to get a coffee cup and get that coffee cup and put it on your desk. And every time you pay positive attention to that classroom or that student in that classroom, put a penny in that cup. And when it's filled, both literally and figuratively, buy yourself a cup of coffee or a glass of wine. And she did it. And she shared with me later on that, Mr. Weeks, you know what? It's working. I'm turning this behavior around now. And guess what? Also, my husband says I'm becoming more positive now. I just kind of dusted my shirt off a little bit and thought, maybe I should become a marriage counselor. Nah. So, but we got to change that around, because we need to really increase that positive to negative ratio, which we engage with students every day, right? And I saw this again with a wonderful teacher I worked with also in kindergarten at that very same school. A wonderful kindergarten teacher who was having circle time on the carpet. And all of her little lovely ones were all in a circle. The 2 of them were using unsafe hands, hitting and pushing, throwing elbows. She didn't even bother to acknowledge it. She simply looked to the right and she says, "Oh, I love how my friends over here are using safe hands. I love it. They're being so kind to each other." And you know what happened? Those 2 guys that were fighting, they just did like this. Right? Because they want that attention. We got to speak to what we want to see, and that's positive behavior. Let's talk about relationship skills. We hear this so often with the schools that I work in, and I work with quite a few, that kids don't have any relationship skills. Or they say things like, that boy doesn't know respect. We've got to model respect. We've got to model that every chance we get. These are called teachable moments, guys. We know this, right? Teaching cooperation, teaching thank you, may I, and please can happen in school, because sometimes it doesn't happen at home. Conflict negotiation, what we might call conflict resolution. These happen in schools. Seeking and offering help when needed. Doesn't it feel great when you ask a student, what do you need? How can I help you? And you see their face light up. They don't hear that very often. What do you need to be successful? What do you need to be helped? How can I help you? So giving these opportunities for active listening and cooperation really helps to foster their relationship skills. I love classroom meetings. As a 4th grade teacher, this was my favorite thing to do. Every Monday morning, I look so forward to it. We had discussions around everything from what's your favorite ice cream to what was challenging about your weekend. Because we know many times some of our kids go to their other parent for the weekend, or they do things that may not be delightful. But creating that space where they can talk about that and building on that slight or light conversation to one that's more serious can have resounding impacts in your classroom and building culture and climate in your school. Sensory diets and sensory rooms. Has anyone had any experience with this in your districts? Right, it's a great thing. You look at a student who's oftentimes ejected from the classroom for whatever reason, either he bolts out or she bolts out, or they're put out of the classroom by the teacher. What if we change that around? What if when Jeremy was put out of the classroom or left out of the classroom every day, almost without break, at least twice a day, and he's missing maybe an hour of instruction? What if we got in front of that and we became more proactive? We said, you know what? What if we gave Jeremy some sensory diets? What if we prescribed a diet of vestibular and proprioceptive activities, some to bring him up or bring him down, and get him just balanced so right? Just in that middle ground that's just great for him to learn. What if we did that? Well, I tell you what will happen. We spend a lot less time being out of the classroom. We have a lot more instruction time. And it's so beautiful when a kid comes into the sensory room and says, what am I going to do today? I think I'll do I'm forgetting it right now, the trampoline. Maybe I'll do the swing as well, because rocking gets me back into balance. And they take that sensory diet, they complete the checklist, it goes back to their teacher. She looks at that checklist and says, you know, when he came back, he was really balanced today. This is working. So please consider sensory diets and sensory rooms. A sensory room is a place where a child can go in and feel better when they come out. You know, sometimes as educators, we think that it's a crime to make a student feel better when they behave badly. And it's not. It's not a crime. We know this, right? It's not a crime to make a student feel better when they've done something wrong. Emotional awareness. What messages is my body sending me? What is my experience in the here and now? These things must be practiced. So many times we expect students to have this ability to do this, to express their emotions, but sometimes they don't know how. They don't have the experience. They don't have the means to do this. Sometimes we don't even have the ability, right? So trauma survivors often have somatic or body experiences like I described earlier with a young lady at Chuck E. Cheese that are linked to overwhelming body sensations, negative emotions, and maladaptive thoughts that are easily activated by triggers, internal or external. It could be something that someone says, a cologne that someone has on. It could be having the right ED on the board. What is emotional regulation? Emotional regulation is the development of the ability to maintain a well-regulated emotional state to cope with everyday stress. We have this as adults. It took us a while to get here though, right? Many of our students don't have this. It's the ability to differentiate between emotions and body sensations. It's the ability to notice the sensation, even if you don't know why these sensations are coming up, and to be able to manage them. It doesn't just happen, it comes with a lot of practice, and sometimes it needs to be co-regulated. So we have relationship skills, emotional awareness, and lastly, emotional regulation. With self-regulation and universal needs, belonging, mastery, independence, and generosity, we can help students. Whereas belonging, we have attachment and significance. I am important to someone and they want to know what my life is like. Not only what is wrong with me, but what is good about me too. Now, how can educators connect with students? We can be continuously curious about how the child is experiencing their world and get to know them, not just what their name is, but more about them. Connect with them on a deeper level. Find out their likes and dislikes and explore what they need most to feel supported. Now, where there's mastery, there's achievement and competence. But once I feel like I am good at something, I'm in control of my behavior and reactions. There's more to me than just my stress and trauma. And how can educators promote mastery? Identify each student's potential. I mentioned Mr. Simpson earlier. I hope I did. What stood out about Mr. Simpson is that he always would tell me, Weeks or Will, you have potential. That just always, it just really had an impact on me. And I always hear his voice to this day. So just helping students realize their potential is really, really important. Teaching in emotional awareness and regulation, and then practice with them. Provide opportunities for students to experience their strengths. And this may be that, in your English class, maybe they're not good at English, but they may be really good at passing out pencils or helping others, or they may be really good at power tools. You figure, like, Mr. Weeks, how does that help? How does that fit? We can find a way to make it fit. Because when students realize they're good at one thing, they have confidence they can be good at more things. Where there's independence, there's autonomy and power. I have a choice. And how can educators promote a sense of independence? Provide choices with homework assignments, with school assignments. Provide options for the best ways they can help and be ready to learn. And lastly, we have generosity. And where there's generosity, we have true altruism and true virtue. I have value and I can help others. How can educators promote generosity and help students feel valuable? Well, it helps students feel that they are not alone. And this helps them to develop empathy for others. And we should always point out a student's self-worth because, as Dr. Hargrave said, sometimes students miss us. They don't see us. So we need to see our students. We should provide opportunities for them to experience their value when they help others. So we have it here. Awareness plus practice equals self-regulation. Again, awareness plus practice equals self-regulation. So let's talk now about step 4, prioritizing social and emotional skill development. Schools must be more than standardized tests. Yeah, we test them so much. They must enhance social and emotional learning because school is often the only place where true socialization really happens. They don't get it at home. I recall a parent sharing with me years ago when I worked as a dean, well, he doesn't do this at home. Well, he doesn't have 28 brothers and sisters at home. So of course he doesn't do that at home. He does it in school. Social emotional skills. It improves attitudes towards self, school, and others. It enhances positive pro-social behavior. It reduces conduct problems. It reduces emotional distress. And it improves academic performance. Difficulty regulating emotions can lead to a host of problems in the school setting. Poor impulse control, aggression, lack of a predictable sense of self, and trouble interpreting the emotional signals of others, to name a few. So we know that sweaty palms plus a hot head is something in my belly means I'm angry. We know this. I know right now I'm experiencing serious butterflies. So I'm trying to tell myself, Will, slow down. You're talking a little bit fast, you're a little nervous, slow it down. I'm aware of that. Sometimes our students aren't aware of that. We got to practice that with them and let them know what they're experiencing and how they can help with that. So if you ask a student, what are you feeling? Whether they're in grades K through 12, what happens? They have about 10 go-to words, right? I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm sleepy, I'm mad. Or maybe a few new ones too that I haven't kept up on, right? I'm good, right? I'm good, I'm straight, right? But they don't say things like queasy or dense or fluttery or electric or nervous or icy or cold or sweaty. Introduce these words to them because once they have this in their vocabulary, they become more able to express themselves. So having these conversations around sensation words is really important. Trauma-informed resilient schools avoid consequences such as timeouts and suspensions because it's much easier to do a time in. A time in looks like this. You guys have done a remarkable job so far. Thank you so much. Yeah. That's a time in. It felt good, didn't it? Like it felt good. But that's a time in, guys, versus a timeout. So a timeout looks like this. My mic isn't working well. Why don't you go out in the hallway and sit down for about 10 minutes? Right? That's the difference between a time in and a timeout. Oh, wait. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. So we understand that exclusionary practices encourage the child to withdraw and reinforce the message that they are bad. We don't want to send that message to our children by any means, right? So let's talk lastly about step 5, how we can use social emotional learning to establish safety. How can we help? I know you've been waiting for this question. Through processing trauma, restoring resilience, and fostering connections are the way we can help. These are some proactive strategies to healing trauma and promoting resilience with Tier 1 supports. We're doing Tier 1 work, guys, but we want to do it with a trauma-informed and resilience-focused lens. It's just being more curious about what that child is experiencing in the here and now. We want to limit our opportunities for students to feel anxious and or threatened. I was just in a school in Michigan, and like what happens in many schools across our country, during arrival, there's 1,000 adults around. We're all around, we're present, we're chipper, but dismissal is crickets. Maybe one adult outside. Am I wrong? Isn't that the case in some cases? It's the case. We've got to be there for them in those challenging moments where they feel alone, whether it be recess, whether it be transitions in the hallway. We need to be consistent. We need to be have that structure every day so that students walk through a gauntlet of caring adults. One of my favorite things to do as a resilience coach, as a dean of students, was to greet students in the morning, because I got a really great glimpse into what their day was going to be like. I'll give you an example of two students. One was named Cortez, and the other one I can't remember. Cortez's grandmother would be much like this. Cortez would jump out of the car. Why am I talking to this mic? I got this mic on. So Cortez would jump out of the car, and he would simply say, his grandmother would say, "Have a good day, Cortez. I love you, baby. Be good. Okay, grandmama, see you later." Versus, "If I get a phone call today, I'm gonna whoop your ass." You hear me? Do you hear me? Yeah, I hear you. So what's gonna happen when that child gets to school? We know what's gonna happen. Someone's gonna feel that wrath. Someone's gonna feel that pain, whether it be the teacher or the student. So give that structure, be there for them, offer that sense of safety. And it's not about what we think is safe, right? It's not about what we think is safe. We can say this is the safest school in the whole district. What does that child feel? How do they feel? Do they feel like it's really safe? They might tell you a different story. They really might. So we did a survey with our students. We asked them, what are your top 10 fears? Many of them said, of course, parental death. But surprisingly, some of them said, or maybe not surprisingly, a yelling teacher. Go figure, right? A yelling teacher. Students need to know that their schedule is going to be the same every day. They need to know that no one will tease them, that they're in a safe environment. That's what safety is, what they think is safe, not what we think is safe. So what you're looking at right now is a titration and pendulation. It's exposure to trauma themes. Traumatized and stressed children often experience common themes such as anger or fear, which we talked about earlier, that make their lives challenging. During each session of this program, and I'll share that with you in a moment, the child will explore a common trauma theme and the influence it has on the child to help the child discharge some of the activation of that particular theme. For instance, the themes might be worry and hope, fear and safety, as you see here, tension and stress versus calm. And so I have the ability to work, or the opportunity rather, to work with so many great students using this Path to Resilience journal, in which we work with students talking about these trauma themes. And you talk to students about what do they feel in their bodies when they feel fear or anxiety? Where does it show up in your body? Is it in your chest? Is it in your head? When we have these conversations, students begin to realize, okay, I'm aware of what I'm feeling right now. Now when they become aware of it, they can express it. Now we can regulate it. So I love this tool. It's a great tool that we use at Star Commonwealth to help students just be aware of what they're experiencing in the here and now. When they know what they're experiencing, they can be aware of it, they can express it, they can manage it. And as one of my heroes, Mr. Rogers says, feelings are mentionable and manageable, right? So these are body maps. And I got to tell you, when I first saw these, I thought to myself, I'm not going to put those in front of a student. No way. No. I'm afraid of what they might draw on that body. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to have any experience with it. I'm not doing it. No. But much to my surprise, it never happened. No matter what grade level. I work with students in grades level 3 through 12, and they all took to this very well because it gave them opportunity to express where they felt tension, where they felt nervousness at, where they felt excited, where they felt pain when they talked about their loss and their families. So it's a great tool to use. You don't have to be a social worker or a counselor to use them. All you have to do is be a caring adult. So we talked about this dance between the sensory brain or the left brain and the right brain. And we know that many times this dance doesn't happen. Many times our students are not cared for when their needs are not answered when they express these emotions or these sensations. They're neglected. And when this dance doesn't happen, students don't have that ability to regulate themselves. And we know this happens all too often. But we need to be curious. I opened up this presentation talking about the importance of being curious. And I also want to close with the same, on the same note. It's so important that we remain curious in all that we do, because if we're not, we're going to miss those Eds in our classrooms. We're going to miss those Eds in our community. I'm sorry, not those Eds, but those Ryans in our community. We learn what matters most to the child when we're curious. When we're curious, we establish empathetic relationships that are not all knowing. And when we're curious, it keeps us in sync with the child. And when we're curious, it gives the child the lead and it gives them control and power. And lastly, it helps us to know their subjective experiences like they know them. So I talked in the beginning about self-awareness. I want to close on the same note. I, like you, love our students. And you know how much it is important to them that we know their names and remember their names. I've met a few people today and I've forgotten some of their names. I remember some, I've forgotten some too. But they really want us to know their names, right? So I had the ability, or the opportunity rather, to work with a wonderful student in a school that I worked in Detroit, Michigan, or Lincoln Park, Michigan. I met her in 4th grade. I met her again in 5th grade. So when I transitioned to middle school, she transitioned with me as a resilience coach. So we're in 6th grade now, and I've known her for 2 years. But I know hundreds of students, hundreds. And it's September, so I'm getting my memory all back again. I know who you are. I know who you are. But I've forgotten her name. And she realized it. She was starting to realize it. So she started saying to me, "Hey, Mr. Weeks, how you doing? Hey, sweetheart, how are you?" She's testing me now. She's testing me, finding out if I know her name. "Hey, Mr. Weeks. Hey, sweetheart." So I know now I can't ask her friends, because if I ask her friends, they're going to say, "Mr. Weeks forgot your name, girl. He forgot your name. Do you believe he forgot your name?" So I'm just really trying now. I'm just buying some time. We're in an assembly. "Mr. Weeks, how are you doing?" "Hey, sweetheart, how are you?" And it's driving me crazy. So stay with me, bear with me. It's Friday night now. I'm at home and I've made it through another week. I don't know her name, but I'm getting close. She's gonna reveal me. She's gonna blow my cover. She's gonna reveal that I've forgotten her name. I can't let that happen. So I go through my routine. When I first started my self-care act, I would go home. It would take me an hour to get undressed. I take off my right shoe. After about 15 minutes, I take off the next shoe. It took about a whole hour to get undressed. I got away from that process. I changed all of that. I developed some real self-care strategies. So this Friday was my night. I drew a hot bath. Yeah, I'm a man, I take baths. And I drew a hot bath. I had my candles. I had my glass of wine. I had my jazz music playing. It was Self-Care Friday. And when you know it, as I began to do my self-care, like an airplane designed by a wonderful 2nd grade engineer, it came in, it hit me right in the head. Madeline. So what am I saying, everyone? When we practice self-care, we can show up for ourselves and we can show up for them as well. So if anything, I want you to be curious. I want you to practice self-care. And please, by all means, we want you to stay in touch. I hope that I've done a good job of expressing what we can do and how we would love to help North Carolina State Board of Education. I've left a link right here. I would love you to look at that link, because they're going to do a much better job of revealing some of the things that we can do with communities just like you. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much. I hope so. Yes, please. So that's exactly what, so you saw Dr. I'm excited because you recognize that. I'm sorry, let me calm down. So yes, you're spot on. You saw Dr. Martin Brokenleg. He was one of the creators of the Circle of Courage. And he talks about the Lakota tribe. He's from the Lakota tribe. So these are definitely derived from that. And it does model that medicine well. You're spot on. Yes, it does. So these are age-old practices from indigenous cultures that get back to caring for the child. You know, our Essential Way, we've gotten away from that. We're more about law and order. They're more about whole child experiences. So thank you for that question. Oh, please.
Yeah, this is more of a comment than a question.
Yes.
So to that point, which I think is beautiful, there's a couple of things in your presentation that I'd just like to key in on.
Yes.
One is I think you did a beautiful job of talking about just like the breadth and depth of the experiences that students bring.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
That there's a whole other domain.
Yes.
That often impacts education, but we're not trained in. how to recognize, how to facilitate, how to respond to.
Yes.
And so I'm grateful that that's being leveled up in this conversation.
Thank you.
But to that point, this notion of the Lakota in the wheel, I would like to layer on top of that the notion of culture,
Yes.
right? Because
Yes.
culture is a mediator, right, of neurological responses. And we tend to think about it as an add-on, right? So if a child feels unsafe, and to your point, not what we feel is safe, but if they feel unsafe,
Yeah.
right? And so I'm speaking half from experience here. But if I go into an environment, it's clear, given the cultural environment there, that I don't belong, it sets off some of the same neurological responses of lack of safety, right, that trigger the amygdala,
Absolutely.
that cause, right, the certain hormones to be the cortisol levels to get jacked. So we think, oh, culture's an add-on. No, right? And I can't learn, right, after I come down off that amygdala hijack for another 20 minutes.
Not for a minute.
No. So culture, in fact, does impact the environment when we create environments that are trauma informed, but they're culturally incongruent. Sometimes schools can be sites where we re-traumatize kids.
They can be triggers.
Right, we can be triggers. So I just like to emphasize that layer as well. That culture is not an add-on, right? It has to be permeated through everything.
Yes.
Right. To
Yes.
help you create a trauma-informed environment.
Indeed.
So thank you. I thought that was beautiful, right?
No, thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you. Please, someone else. Please. I love questions. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Now I believe we have a panel of experts in the field here with us.
Well, thank you all so much for being so attentive during Mr. Weeks' presentation. And thank you so much, Mr. Weeks, for coming to North Carolina and sharing STARS Commonwealth's vision and the work that you do with our students in classrooms and training teachers to be prepared to deal with the trauma-informed instructions and to meet our students' needs. And I first became acquainted with Star Commonwealth from my friend, LaShonda Garrison, who is on joining us right now from Bahrain. She is the 2021 DODEA Teacher of the Year. And it's nearly midnight there, and she's hanging tough with us so that she can still be on to talk about to us about her work with trauma-informed instruction and how she supports military-connected students. Along with us here today, we also have more experts from the state of North Carolina who are going to talk to you about ways that they have embedded trauma-informed instruction, social emotional learning, restorative practices, and all the ways that we are looking to continuously be supportive of our students and to meet our students' needs so that they are able to reach self-actualization and be their best selves. We've heard already that the answers lie with the practitioners. The problems that we have in public education are being solved every day in our classrooms in North Carolina. And so I'm so pleased today to introduce you to this group, a panel of experts who are going to talk to you about some of their experiences in their classrooms and how they've been able to support their students fully through the way that they have improved their teaching practice and really looked for opportunities to support their students. So first, I have my incredible Teacher of the Year cohort partner, the 2021 Burroughs Welcome Fund North Carolina Teacher of the Year, Miss Eugenia Floyd, who will be And Eugenia is going to be talking with us about how her school has implemented restorative practices to meet their students' needs. Along with Eugenia is her 2021 Western Region Teacher of the Year, Erin Ellington, who is going to be, Northwest, who is going to be discussing how her school district has embraced social emotional learning from a district level to fully support the needs of all of the students in Watauga County Schools. We are also joined by our North Carolina Beginning Teacher of the Year, Ms. Emily Higdon. And Emily is an alternative school teacher. So she's going to be talking to us about how her school is using social emotional learning and whole child supports to fully meet the needs of the students in their classrooms so that they are able to help their students transition back into their traditional high school setting. We are also joined by the 2021 Piedmont Triad Region Teacher, or sorry, 2020 Piedmont Triad Teacher of the Year, Miss Tanya Smith. And Tanya is going to be discussing how she has embedded social emotional learning into a standards aligned curriculum in her music classroom for 6th through 12th graders in Elkin City schools. And then I will also be doing some wraparound and talking to you about how I have seen trauma-informed instruction and social emotional learning truly help the students in my classroom and helped all of the students that we have in North Carolina to be successful as they navigate through the challenges that they will face going through their K-12 experience. So we will begin with Erin. Do you want to go ahead and start?
I would love to. Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much for having me today. I am Erin Ellington, the 2021 Burroughs Wellcome Fund Northwest Region Teacher of the Year, and happy to have the privilege to speak with you. I'm representing Watauga County Schools, where I am a K-8 music educator at Parkway and Mabel Schools, and I just have to brag a little bit about having 2 music educators on this panel. I just think that's pretty cool. Not surprised though, no surprise. I just have to share with you a little bit about, I'm giving you the educator's perspective, but I do need to shout out my colleagues, my school social workers and counselors who were integral in making the community part of what I'm about to share with you happen, as far as doing the research, the preparation and planning, and then the implementation and training. As we just heard Mr. Weeks say and other folks say, we need the tools and the resources and able to help our students. And so I just have to shout out my colleagues who really did the work before me to make me able to do what I'm doing. But first, also, I want you to just imagine that you are the school leader for the day. It is a random Thursday. A couple of weeks ago, we had family teacher conferences, and so we had an early release day. You are in charge of making sure that everything happens smoothly, the building is running, and that everybody, the building, school students and educators are safe. That is your job. And this actually happened. So this is your day today. Right when the day starts in the morning, in the carpool line, there is an announcement that comes over this announcement system saying, Mr. Weinbarger, please report to the front door with a shovel. Mr. Weinbarger, please report to the front door with a shovel. And I'll just say that he's our custodian, and it is often that he is paged over the intercom, however, not with the shovel part. And it was found that the line was not able to continue because there was a dead bird blocking the car line. So that had to be taken care of. Followed by, not long after, the kindergarten PE block had a collision accidental collision between 2 students who broke their leg. One student broke their leg on the top and bottom of his leg. Followed by another situation where a student threatened to harm himself or others, in which a protocol has to be enacted called a mobile crisis, where a specialist has to come report to the school, and it's a special team which consists right now of 1 person who is serving 5 different counties. So it could take up to 3 to 4 hours for them to be able to assist on site, in which case our student is then immediately sent to the emergency room for treatment. And then in the span of this very short 4-hour day, your day is starting to conclude. And during dismissal, as Mr. Weeks mentioned, that arrival and dismissal, that's a lot going on. And so in the midst of one of the children trying to get into their vehicle, missteps, falls down, the babysitter isn't paying attention and accidentally drives over the child's foot. And so again, so that's your day, just a very shortened day. And I just want you to just imagine all of the quick decision making, all of the bases that you have to cover in order to make sure everyone is safe and the day is able to continue on for parents to be able to meet with their teachers for conferences, which haven't even happened yet. So that is, from the educator's perspective, these are the things that we have to our emotional energy is taxed as well. And in Watauga County Schools, our Watauga this is a tongue twister for me. The Watauga Compassionate Community Initiative was born in 2015 as folks in our community realized that our youth needed some resources and tools to be able to deal with trauma and to have some resiliency skills that they could take beyond our classrooms. And so out of that came some training for us. Our district has allowed for training to happen. We've I believe as a whole school studied, as a district studied, the Heart of Learning and Teaching was one of the texts that we used, and then received some virtual training and are continuing with that as well. So the adults are receiving that training to be able to pass that on to kids. And then the tools that we have are Calm Classrooms. That's why I'm here. I'm now getting to my point. The Calm Classrooms are what we are using throughout our schools. We don't yet have them in every classroom, but I do happen to have them in both of my classrooms. And what that means is I brought some props to show you. What that means is it's not a punishment. It's a time in, as Mr. Weeks was just mentioning. I feel like we should be friends. I just love that you set me up so well. So we have, if it should be a need for a child to, if they're feeling like their brain is offline, we have some common vocabulary talking about the hand-brain model. And so this is your thinking brain. And when your emotions are at a level 5 is what we call it, and you're offline, there is an opportunity for you to go in a safe place to help with that. This is a very popular one, the bubble timer, which brings me back to when I was a kid. We have some stress balls that are provided to us, and there's some focus, listen, and breathe are some words there. You may just want to pet something that's cute and stuffy. You might need to do that. And there's, of course, in the conference that we have every spring, that brings the community together because this is a community initiative, not just for the schools. We have a conference every spring where they hand out strategies or tools that may be used for adults as well. And so I have put those in my Calm Classroom. It's just something physical to hold on to, and then a drawing or writing toolkit. And so all that to say, the calm corners in our school in my classrooms are extremely helpful. I have a student, Nate, who has for several weeks now had really been disruptive. We cannot figure out what's wrong. And finally, just yesterday, figured out, doesn't matter if we're singing, moving, if we're dancing, whatever, he's all in. But once we start to talk about You're a Grand Old Flag for our Veterans Day program coming up, performing in front of people next week, he goes offline. And so have figured out that that's why he's been needing to go to the Calm Corner. And so now we can work through that and hopefully help him be successful next week during our parade ceremony. And then as well, as we also just heard again about how it's so important for the adults in our schools to take care of themselves. One of my schools has an adult calming corner, which is a space where it's really just a small room that is low light, and there's a tiny little mini fridge with some cold water bottles, and there's a big basket of chocolates. And it's just a space that we know. I have never seen a single person sit in there for any length of time. That's I don't know if that's realistic, but it's just a space that we know that there are tools and a space for us to take care of ourselves, because we cannot take care of our kids without taking care of ourselves first. And so last but not least, I just wanted to share that not only do the teachers and my colleagues need the resources and training to help our students, but all of that will help our kids, not just in our classroom, but beyond the 4 walls. And so, which is our ultimate goal, is to help them be successful human beings. So thank you for having me here. It's my privilege. I invite all of you to come and visit Watauga County anytime, all the time. Thank you so much.
I'll go next. Can everybody hear me okay? Hello, everyone. I am Eugenia Floyd. I'm your Girls Welcome Fund North Carolina Teacher of the Year for the year 2021. Woohoo! Yes. I'm I'm really honored to have the opportunity to share just some of the practices that my school building has incorporated. One of the things I was actually just talking to Tabari about was, I was like, when can you come to my school? Because I really want to show you all what we do, like where I came from. I am from the Chapel Hill Carborough City Schools, and I teach at Mary Scroggs Elementary School. So I teach 4th grade. And not only do I teach in that school district, but I also grew up there. So I know as I sit and act as an advisor to the board, many of the conversations that I'm learning about and seeing that you all have are things that related to me. So when we talk about children that may have experienced trauma, or when we talk about children that may have experienced homelessness, like that presentation blew me out the wall because I was one of those kids. So when we make decisions about the children in North Carolina, we have to remember that some of them are among you, and your North Carolina Teacher of the Year is one of those people. So I just wanted to lift that up and just let you know that everything that you all are doing is vital and it's important. And I actually talked to my brother recently. I told him I'm really nervous about this conversation, so don't be me too. But I told him, I was like, I'm really nervous about this. And he was like, well, you know what? He's in the business world, that corporate world. And he said, well, the job of the school is, 2 things, right? And I was like, what do you mean? I was like, we do more than 2 things. And he was like, well, no. He was like, you as a teacher, your job is to break down barriers and provide resources. And I said, well, hot dog, there we go. I said, that's the most simplest form of what I try to do as an educator. And one of the reasons why I got into teaching, I wanted to make sure that the things that happened to me that I didn't like don't happen to anyone else. And I also want to make sure that I'm providing them every possible resource to navigate the space that they're in. So part of that is the work that we have been doing within Mary Scroggs Elementary School, which is restorative practices. I know y'all like books, so I brought them. I'm the literacy teacher. I brought the books. We do 2 parts of this work. Part of the work is we started this work within my school because we actually looked at our data, and we're not going to be purchasing programs unless you have some data to back it, or a reason for purchase. Our reasoning for purchase was our high level of office referrals. So this is anything from hitting to being disrespectful to whatever it is. You get written up, you go to the office. Well, our team of teachers and our SIT coordinators, we thought really long and hard about what do we want to do to make sure that we get in front of those concerns and issues, what's going on within our school environment and in our school climate. And a lot of that work has to do with us being reflective as educators, right? I cannot express enough the power that I have in the atmosphere of the room. I've been telling beginning teachers this all year long. Like, I can come in there tired and my kids will call me out like, are you okay? They want to know what's wrong with you because you're different. So one of the first things that we've been doing with this work with restorative practices, and I'm just going to highlight a few of the main points that have really worked well in my classroom. The first thing that we do every morning is we do have morning meetings, like Mr. Weeks said. That is not a weekly thing, that is a daily thing. And when it's time for the EOG, which starts at 8 a.m., my students are very upset that I can't have a circle before the EOG because the desks are all spread out. This is a time for us to really do something that restorative practices talks about, which is a check-in. Not only did I check in on my students at the door before they came in, because I'm waiting outside the door, but we also need to do a check-in. And like he said, it could be a circle about your favorite color. It could be about the thing that you did last night, what was for dinner. It needs to be something that is light and not harmful, right? So often I've even talked with other teachers about how sometimes it can be a little traumatic if I ask a question like, well, where did you go for winter break? Instead, I should be asking, what was your favorite part of winter break? That's a big difference, even in my language of how I approach my children. The other part of that is I start my circles on the very first day of school. Like literally say, hey, everyone, let's get in a circle. Now, by the time they're in fourth grade, they know what we're doing because this is school wide now. The great part about this is I do ask my children the first question out of my mouth. I teach reading and writing. I ask them, what do you need as a reader? What makes you do your best reading? Or what do you need to learn better? Any of those kind of questions, depending on my audience for the day. But restorative practices speaks a lot about how I'm really setting up my rules. I have chart paper nearby, and we're setting up like our guidelines as a class, like what we want and what we need to make our classroom the best it can be for all the learners in the room. So often, and I will speak for my students, and I'll even speak for the educators in North Carolina, we like things done with us, not to us. And that is what restorative practices talks about. We can develop these guidelines and these rules and these classroom rules and whatever else, school rules. But if kids are involved and you have them at the table, even teachers at the table, when it's happening, the buy-in's already there. And it's already promoted that we as a community are in this together. We of course, like Erin has here, we have some talking pieces. And so often I know that there's lots of concerns sometimes about the time you spend in a circle, Miss Floyd. It could take forever, but yeah, it can. But I also can teach from that circle. So not only am I having the opportunity for my kids to tell me how they're feeling, what they need from me, and what they need from each other, but we also can learn from there. I also want to say that one of the things that I do within those circles is one of the, I guess it's, I learned it in grad school. One of the most powerful things you can do is have a Socratic seminar. So the seminar can already happen within the circle. And that's something that I do several times a year. But I really feel like it's my, like I said before, my job is to break down barriers and provide resources. And when we use the circles not only to build up our classroom morale, but we also use it when things are hard. So today, we all today just exited the building and we walked outside in the little courtyard area. And, honestly, I have to say that many of us would have failed if we were being monitored by district officials because you were talking outside and nobody had the roster of where people was. Maureen, I didn't know where you were, but I saw you later. But I say all that to say, when things like that happen in school buildings all the time, even if it's scheduled, if there's a fire drill, if there's a storm outside my window and it's beating the rain on the panels, we're distracted by everything going on. And I can't even say it's just the kids, I'm distracted too. So we get in a circle. We would come inside from that moment that we don't know what happened, they don't know what happened, and we get in a circle and we talk about the things that went well, we talk about the things that we learned from that moment, and we also talk if we know it, like some of them have questions and they say, well, Miss Floyd, why did that happen, what went down? And I literally, just like I would today, I'm like, I don't know, but I'd love to find out. Maybe we can ask someone else a question and we'll figure that out together. I think it's really important that the other part of this great work with restorative practices is it allows me, I cannot be a true educator if I'm expecting my students to do something that I'm not willing to do myself. So I cannot say, I cannot tell kids, tell me how you feel today. And I don't tell them how I feel. I have to tell them that I stayed up till midnight working on my National Teacher of the Year application. Like they need to know those things because they need to understand that I'm a human being and I'm not a bionic avenger. Like I am not Wonder Woman, even though her outfit's awesome. So I think restorative practice has done a lot for me as an educator to remember to show that vulnerability to my students so that they can be vulnerable with me. I also would love to lift up that this, like Aaron was saying, this work is also done within my school amongst ourselves. So if my PLC has a riff, we're circling up. Let's have a circle. Let's have a talk about it. And a lot of that work is everyone having the goal of restoring the relationship. That's what the circle is for. That's why they're called restorative practices. Even when we think about discipline issues, and I will say that my grade level in particular, I cannot speak on everybody else's, but I know my grade level had definitely went down with our office referrals. Like, unless there was an extreme of things that are like out of, non-negotiables, like hitting, that was it. But most of our questions, every educator that got trained in this, and I, again, like Aaron, want to thank the school social worker and guidance counselors because they received the training, thus trained the whole school. But they gave us these cards, and these cards kind of slip into that little badge I have to normally wear. And when there is a problem that arises, when children are having conflicts with one another, because it comes up, they have to spend 180 days with each other. So we understand in this little small space. So we understand that everybody isn't necessarily getting along. Yes, we have cards, but we ask questions. And I love the question that Mr. Weeks said. He said, you cannot ask kids, what were you thinking? Like, they don't necessarily know, but I can ask them, when you did this, how were you feeling? That would be a more targeted question so that the child can regulate themselves. Again, we are teaching them skills, like Aaron said, for beyond the classroom. So it's important that you know why you were in this space so that you won't repeat that behavior later. I just appreciate you all giving me this time. Thank you.
It is very hard to follow up, Eugenia, so I'm gonna do my best. I'm Emily Higdon. I'm the North Carolina NCAP Prudential Beginning Teacher of the Year, and I work at an alternative high school. So I teach grades 9 through 12 English. I have each class 1 period a day. And I want to start by saying, as a student who is referred to an alternative school, you have experienced a traumatic event, even if that is just you getting identified as an alternative student. The stories that my students come to school telling me just about that moment for them are terrible. Things that they hear about our school, they get told they're going to get beat up as soon as they get to school. The teachers are mean. It's a prison. You're not going to be able to leave the building ever. You're going to get in trouble all the time. You're going to get charges. And they're terrified when they show up. Trying to rebuild the trust that has already been broken when they show up is sometimes a mountain to climb. It takes weeks, months, years sometimes to get to a point where they actually trust the school again or trust adults again. So for every student that shows up, that's already the first trauma that we can identify in them. Plus, if you are misbehaving continuously and you end up at an alternative school, there probably are other traumas going on in your life. So the students that I interact with every day are some of these students that have had 3, 4, 5 traumatic experiences by the age of 14. And so there's already barriers that we're going to have to break down. And that's a huge part of our job. And so at our school, something that we talk about a lot is content is important, but you can't teach content until you get past some of those original barriers. And the biggest one for us is alternative students. You've got this title now. We have to convince them that being an alternative student is not bad. It just means that we're going to teach you in a different way. We're going to love you in a different way. We're going to respect you in a different way. It's going to be more collaborative because obviously the traditional method was not working for you. So we have a lot of different things we do. in order to kind of help these students as they transition to the alternative environment and hopefully transition back to the mainstream school or graduate from us and go on and do great things. Not every student wants to go back to the mainstream school. Some of them, once they get to the alternative environment, really like it. They like the smaller class sizes, they like the more individualized attention, and they like all the weird things that we do. So one of the most, I don't even know how to describe it, one of the most successful, I guess, things that we do in alternative schools is we get really weird. I sing to my students every day and they love and hate it. I'm a terrible singer, not a music teacher, not one of those, but I love it. And I think that the reason I'm mentioning that is because part of being an educator is letting go of embarrassment and fear of how the students are going to judge you and just kind of being yourself, as goofy as that is. Because when they see you being yourself or talking about your own experiences and your own traumas or just what you're stressed about, they love that because they can connect to it. And so I'm in grad school right now and I tell my students, I hate doing homework. I hate it so much. I don't want to do it. And they're like, yeah, we don't want to either. And I'm like, but I go home and I do it every day because I want to make myself better. I want to get smarter. I want to learn more. And even if I don't like it, I'm going to do it. And sometimes even in class, I'll, pull my essay up that I'm working on while they're working on their own projects or essays. And I'm like, this is how I think about an essay. This is how many times I backspace. This is how many times I rearrange things. And they love seeing that because it's real. And so a part of our big initiative is just to be real with our students. Another big thing that we do is giving them as many diverse opportunities as possible. Now, we live in a very rural community and we don't have a lot of funds as far as getting to like field trips. And there's just not a lot of opportunities like that because it's all kind of far away. So we've tried to bring things to them. We have a therapy dog at our school. We have 25 chickens, 26 snakes, and 10 rat colonies, and a rabbit and a hamster. It's a lot of animals, but what we have found is that for some of our most severe behavior issue kids or kids with the most traumatic experiences, holding a snake in class is so calming for them. Now, I'm not saying everyone needs to get a class pet or a snake, but finding things that are tangible for students is so helpful. Maybe it's not a snake crawling on their hand while you're teaching your lesson about mitosis or whatever it is in science class, but it's something tangible like these calm corners, these things that they can touch, because it's a distraction enough that they're not going to be touching other students or getting up and walking around. It's just distracting enough to keep them at a base level of emotions. Other things we do are Flex Fridays, which is one Friday a month where they go into community service. And I bring that up because I think Mr. Roots is talking about it, and everybody has really talked about it today that I've heard, about the importance of community, and not just within your own school, but within the town that you live in and in your district. You have to be connected to your community. And as an alternative school, we often get negative publicity for who we are. People hear that you teach at Union or you go to Union, it's immediately negative. Okay, what have you done wrong? How did you end up there? How did you get hired there? Do you really want to work there or is it a punishment? And I'm like, no, I love it. But we have to have positive community engagement. And when we get positive community engagement, we get more adult interactions with students just beyond teachers. So yes, teachers can be that great positive adult connection, but students need that adult connection to other people too. Maybe it's a musician that plays an instrument that they're interested in. Maybe it's an athlete, a business leader. We had a student last year that really wanted to make a more innovative toothpaste bottle so that his little brother wouldn't make a mess on the sink. That was amazing. So we connected him with business people who knew how to get patents and how to make things like that. And he loved that. We got to see him light up in a way he didn't light up in a normal classroom, because students need positive adult interactions. And sometimes that doesn't just come from the school, that comes from what the school can connect them to. So we love to do our community service activities and let them also kind of get this sense that they're helping someone. So that sense of, in the circle, what was the one? These are on my notes. Generosity, that was a circle, of getting to help other people and see their impact of what they're helping other people with, and then being able to talk about that. So when the news people come and ask them, like, what are some things that you're doing at Union Academy? They can say, oh, we packed backpacks for elementary school students so that they could have supplies when they go home. Or we went and made dog biscuits for the animal shelter. things like that that make them feel like, oh, okay, I'm not just an alternative student anymore. I am someone that helped the sad dogs in the commercials. Like I did something good, and that helps so much when they've experienced trauma because now they see themselves in a positive light. So any opportunity to get outside of the normal setting is a huge deal. We also have a big issue with students who come in who have had negative experiences in therapy, probably because they have charges. So they've been in some type of situation where there was a therapist tried to get information out of them. And that's the therapist's job. That's what they're trying to do. But the students often feel targeted by therapists. And so we have a huge barrier to break when we have students that want to talk to a counselor or somebody, but they don't trust the counselor. So our counselor works very hard to be visible to the students every single day. And I just want to make a side tangent. Mental health specialists in schools are one of the best ways to help with this kind of stuff. And every school should have at least one, if not two, if not three, if not 10, whatever, as many as possible, because that is a huge help. I'm not a trained specialist. I can only love on the kids as best I know, but the specialist can really help them. And so we work hard to make sure that she's seen by the students, that she talks to the students. She's actually our door greeter every day now, instead of it being our principal. Our principal meets them in the hallway, but she's the one at the door so that they see Miss Sunshine. Her name is Sunshine, given name. And so they see Miss Sunshine at the door every day, and they know Miss Sunshine is here for me, and she's going to see me every day. And when she's not there, they have now started saying, "Where's Sunshine? My day's going to be so cloudy and boring because Sunshine's gone." And it's like a joke, but it's a nice thing for them to know that she's there. So I can only speak from the alternative school experience. This is my 3rd year teaching, so that's the only school I've ever taught at. But I can say that for alternative students, being there already is traumatic enough as it is. And so there's already barriers we have to break down. But giving them diverse opportunities, loving them no matter what their past is, and maybe never bringing up their past mistakes. If you learn about them, don't bring them up, don't talk about them. Have positive relationships as a community beyond your school and work to make your school a positive place where they can feel like they're making a difference. Those are all the things that have been impactful in my experience. So thank you.
Okay, and then next we're going to ask Ms. Garrison if you want to bring your video back up and unmute. We would love to hear from you.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, perfect. I'm so glad to be here in this space with everyone. Again, my name is LaShonda Garrison, and I am just delighted and honored to be here. One of the main reasons why I am honored is because I get to hear these amazing conversations about trauma, resilience, and how we are taking this focus to support our students. So to give you a little bit of background about me, I teach in Bahrain. I work for the Department of Defense Education Activity, and I support military-connected students who live overseas with their parents or caregivers. And before I moved to Bahrain, I lived in Rota, Spain. And I had already noticed, being a military child, growing up as a military child myself, a mother of military connected children, and also being a spouse to a military service members, the constant moves, the transitions, the being the new kid at school really does make an impact on our students. We have over 2 million military connected children in the United States. And I know for a fact that we have a lot of military connected children in North Carolina. So again, I'm honored to be here to advocate and to speak on their behalf as you are talking about trauma and resilience and just care for all of our students, to include military connected children. I first got involved with this work because I have to be honest, there was this 60-minute special years ago that Oprah did, and she talked about trauma. And she talked about the impacts that one adult can make on a child that could impact their lives forever, their life forever. And immediately then I started looking for training to be a trauma-informed educator, and I couldn't find anything. I went back into the classroom almost 3 years ago, and I knew then that I was not equipped to support my students. I didn't have the skills to support my students who were struggling emotionally and socially. So I started looking again for trauma-informed practices because I started thinking, this is what I need, this is what I'm missing. Then a few months later, COVID hit. And I knew more than ever that being a trauma-informed educator was going to be necessary. It was needed before COVID, especially for the families and students that I serve, but it was a desperate need now. And that's when I stumbled onto Star Commonwealth. They actually offered free courses and they were put together well. They were thoughtful, they were engaging, and I learned a lot. And for me, this was the missing link. And I started exploring their resources and started sharing. And then I had this awesome opportunity to be a state teacher of the year and to represent DODEA. And from there, I started partnering with other state teachers of the year like Maureen, and we all started meeting and discussing how can we get this out there to support our states, which is what brought me here with you all today. As educators, we aren't counselors. Some of us might be trained, but I have to tell you, I'm not a counselor. I'm not a psychologist, but I can stay curious. And I also can recognize when my students are going through things. And that's the idea of being trauma informed. I am just informed to the signs of trauma. I don't diagnose, I just recognize those and I incorporate practices of resilience, whether those are restorative practices, social emotional practices, or just using trauma informed care. It's an awareness that we have, and then it prompts us to use tools to support our students. One of the other promising things about being trauma informed is that it is a parallel process. And what I mean by that is, as we are becoming more trauma informed, we are also healing along with our students. And again, that is something that we need now more than ever in this day of COVID and living through this pandemic and teaching and learning through this pandemic. I heard a trauma-informed educator tell me, he's the principal of a school in Nashville, and he said, LaShonda, 99% of the work of being trauma-informed begins with us, the adults, but 100% of it impacts children. This is a change of heart and a change of how we see our students, so that when we create these trauma-informed spaces, it creates opportunities to humanize our students because we create safe spaces to see them and to hear and learn from their stories. There was a gentleman earlier who spoke about culture. And by being trauma informed, I can weave in culture and I can promote equity because my students are primed to learn. Being trauma informed, being culturally responsive, and using practices like storytelling all have research that show that all of these practices support our students with their brain development in order to help them learn. And ultimately, our students are in our classrooms every day to learn. I had Orion in my classroom. He is the reason why I am here today. My Ryan changed my life and the trajectory of my career because I let him. And if you allow a child to change you, they will for the better. So I empower you to please utilize as many of these practices as possible because they are all to help support our students so that they can learn and thrive and to be the best people that they can be. Thank you so much for this time and this space.
I'll refresh your memory because I'm reading the room. You don't know who I am. It's okay. We're all tired. I'm Tanya Smith, and I served as the 2020 Piedmont Triad Region Teacher of the Year. And it was a true blessing and an honor for me to do that. I am a survivor of childhood trauma. I don't talk about it. Growing up, you didn't talk about it. I went to school with bright eyes and lots of things to say because I wanted to be valued. I became a teacher because I wanted somebody to feel valued because I craved it so much growing up. It's not that my parents didn't love me. I won't get into all the details. This is very, very personal. But it wasn't easy. It was not easy. So my journey to social emotional learning has been going on for a long, long time. It began specifically, I remember, in 2014. My father collapsed, and then after a long stay in hospice with us sitting by his bedside, died unexpectedly. And I had prior to that been doing some things with students like a 3-point check-in. Okay, so I'm reading the room right now, and I learned to read the room as a child because of the trauma. You know, because if you go in the room and it's not good, you hide. Do you understand where I'm coming from? You hide. So I started saying, write down 3 things you'd like for me to know about you if you knew they were private, and I wouldn't tell anyone, with the exception that you are going to harm yourself. And so I started finding out who my students were, you know, their homes, and it helped inform me and helped me to be able to refer them to those awesome social workers and guidance counselors that, you know all of the things that they need to know to get them the help that they need. But it also helped me form relationships with my students to the point where I could have conversations with them and their parents, and they felt cared about and valued. I'm in the music classroom. I teach 7th through 12th grade vocal music. I used to teach instrumental music, band as well. So I had it all, and general music. It was quite a ride for a while. That morphed, that 3-point check-in during COVID and the restorative circles that I would do, because the class meeting thing, because that's awesome, and I've been doing those as well, morphed into a question of the day. It's our bell ringer. It's my curiosity question, Mr. Weeks, and I want to ask you how you would feel if you were a student in a classroom and you came in and you had a Google question. You could type in a private chat, or you could discuss it out loud. It was your choice. What do you need from me to help you feel successful? That's one day. Or, we've been together now for 3 rehearsals, and what area do you feel you need the most work? Or how can I help you? What's your greatest strength? Type your answer in a private chat. What is one thing you would like for me to know about you right now? What's your biggest dream? We're almost 2 weeks in. How are you feeling about school? You should have seen some of those answers. Those were great. Self-awareness is a vital social emotional life skill. Are you aware when you feel a strong emotion taking over? What are your triggers? They talk about triggers all the time. That triggers me. Just listen to them. They'll tell you everything you want to know. If you could make a positive change in your life, what would it be? Are you willing to get help with this? Oh, I had several referrals to guidance after that question. We're becoming more self-aware through our lessons. Are you finding any personal connections between the music we are studying and life events, either personal or around the world? Why or why not? See, I connect it to my curriculum every day. This is our bell ringer, but it is not mutually exclusive from academic learning at all. And I will tell you something of which I'm very proud, if I may. And Mama said, never brag, but I'm going to do it. So this year, coming back in after this very, very trauma-filled experience that we've all had, My students are getting ready to have their very first in-person in our auditorium concert. Yeah, right? So they should get to help choose the music. But I told them, I said, you know what? I'm going to give you a theme. And the theme is going to be decisions, because how we go about the rest of this year is going to be what you decide it's going to be. So we pulled some stuff and we looked online, and there's a piece that we've done in the past. It's called Decision, and it's about a Native American woman. She was Cherokee from the Qualla Boundary. To be exact, it's based on a true story, that fell in love with a white man, and she had to make a decision to stay with her people or go with the man she loved. And there are expressive elements in this that we are to teach in music literacy and musical response and contextual relevancy with American history. And we went through that piece. They picked it, by the way, and I'm using it for my national boards. Yeah, they picked it. And we did a lyrics analysis, and we said, why do you think there's a forte on this word? Why do you think when we sing softly, we're singing in Cherokee? Why? When she's asking, what should I do? What should I decide? Why did that composer make it sound this way? Why is this rhythm here? They did it. They were amazing. These students want to be heard. They want to be seen. They want to feel valued. And let me tell you what else they picked, and then I'm going to be quiet after I tell you one personal anecdote. They picked For the Beauty of the Earth because they said, we're deciding to be grateful. Isn't that beautiful? They picked Seasons of Love from the musical Rent because measuring a year in the life of a person is the greatest gift you can give someone, as you live every moment with that person to the best of your ability, and you give them that space in your life, and you hear them and you see them. They picked a gospel spiritual called Praise His Holy Name that was entrenched in tradition. They picked a piece called Send Down the Rain by Joyce Eilers, that rain is not always a bad thing. Sometimes it can cleanse us. They did that. They did that, my students. And I'm so proud of them for that. I feel so valued by them. And I'll tell you why. Lost my dad in 2014, 2017. My mother died on Mother's Day. She always knew when to do things. God rest her soul. She would not laugh, but we can. We were due to sing. She was in nursing care for severe health reasons. And we were due to sing at her nursing center the very next day, the day after she died. It was for National Nursing Home Week. And I wanted my students to see what a person does when they have a commitment. I don't suggest that everyone do this, but I made the commitment and I decided to sing. So I drive a bus. Freebird can tell you, I drive a bus. Yes, Julie. And I went and got the activity bus, and I pulled in the school, and I got my kids loaded on, and they go, Miss Smith, you okay? You okay, Miss Smith? And I couldn't crank the bus. And I'd been doing all this stuff with them, and it was really silent. And on the back of the bus, I don't remember the kid's name, but the kid said, hey, Miss Smith, you always have our back. Let us have yours. And I cranked that bus, and we went and sang at Chatham Nursing Center. And did we cry? Yes, we did. We cried, but we sang for Mama. And they learned how to honor commitments and what music can do to heal and serve. So we are servants of song in Elkin City Schools. Please come see us. We'd love to have you. Social emotional learning, just creates good citizens. That's all. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, so you've heard so many great examples of how social emotional learning, educating the whole child, fully supporting our students is a priority for teachers in our state. But I have a quick question for all of you. I want you all to do a snap 3-second memory you have from any time during K-12. How many of you thought of something that a teacher said to you that made you, motivated you, a best friend you had, some kind of fun activity you did on a field trip, something you did in the lunchroom? How many of you had that thought? How many of you thought about how you had to do proofs in geometry, how you had to conjugate verbs in Spanish, or how you had to diagram sentences if you're as old as me in English? Okay, so maybe a couple people. Social emotional learning has been part of our schools since schools began. Schools have been the center of our community. Schools have been the center of developing citizens, as Tanya said, developing good citizens that are going to be the people who will walk out of our doors when they are in the 12th grade, empowered to live their best life because of the public education that they received in North Carolina. We as educators have a priority, and we as educators have an obligation to ensure that we are meeting all of the needs of our students academically and socially and emotionally. And we are doing a really good job of that in our classrooms. But as you've heard from my colleagues, we do need additional support in order to ensure that we can continue meeting the needs of all of our students. And that comes in the support of principals. It comes in the support of the state board, making a priority to have social emotional learning and whole child education as something that we are supporting from the state level down to the classroom level. But it also means that we are giving our teachers the ability to have time during the instructional day to build in those social emotional learning supports. And that can be done, just as Tanya pointed out, through embedding it into your curriculum, or as Eugenia pointed out, as putting it into the restorative circles and being able to use those restorative practices to really bring your students back together during the instructional time. Or as Erin pointed out, how she has the calm down corners. And as Emily pointed out, how she is able to bring in things from outside, like snakes, which I'm a biology teacher, but there will never be a snake in my classroom. But to find those unique ways to reach your students. It can be done, and it must be done, because our students deserve the best education that we can possibly give them. And that education is not only academic, that education is supporting the whole child. So I thank you all so much for your attention today, as this incredible panel of teachers had an opportunity to talk to you about ways that they have embedded social emotional learning, trauma-informed instruction, and whole child supports into their curricular day. And if anyone has any questions for anyone on the panel, we would love to answer those at this time. Thank you. Okay, well, if there's no more questions, then I will go ahead and go give the mic back to Chairman Davis. Thank you very much.
We have one final session today, and I'll turn to Dr. Ashburn and Mr. Powell for what is sure to be an exciting finish.
All right, y'all. We are closing out and we're going to do this quickly. I always say I'm a high school principal and a mom to 3 children, so there is literally nothing I cannot do, right? Okay. Literally, quite literally. So I'm very excited to be here to present with my friend John Powell from the Campbell Law School. We've known each other for quite some time, and we're going to talk about 2 specific strategies, mediation and circles, that we have used in schools to create improved experiences for kids, and most importantly, to impact student academic outcomes. So I'm going to let John introduce himself, and then he's going to talk about the mediation process.
Good afternoon. How y'all doing? I told Ms. Floyd I was going to call her out, and she looked like she got really worried. What I want to do, though, is I was sitting at this table over here, and she started talking about circle and restorative justice, and I had to get up. I had to walk around that post so I could see you because you were speaking my language. And I just want to thank you all for that, because restorative justice is my jam. And I'm certainly here to talk about it, but I'm so encouraged that I've already heard people talking about this. It lets me know I'm not as crazy as people once thought I was. So thank you for bringing that message. My name is John Powell. As Elena said, we are friends. I am so glad to be her friend. We didn't get off to the best start, so that should tell you something about her grace. When she was a brand new principal at East Garner Middle School, which is a school that I attended when I was in 7th and 8th grade. As a matter of fact, every school that I attended in Wake County, we're doing restorative practices in now, so I'm very proud of that. We had been working in her school for a while, but she was new, and I was out there one day to work with some girls that had been in a fight. And I was walking toward the room with one of them, and Elena came up and introduced herself as the new principal. First time I'd ever met her in my life. She said, "I've heard about the great work. I wonder if I can join you in the room." Do you remember this? Yes, you do. This is another example of her grace. And I said, "I'm sorry, you cannot." And I felt so terrible. I thought, I have just refused the new principal to come in the room and participate in what we're doing. But I did go on to explain, these kids have got to feel completely safe to be able to admit any wrongdoing that they have done. And the principal in the room may not be the safest place for them. I have come to learn that she is probably the safest person for them in the building. And so later we were able to get the permission of the participants, and Elena was able to come into the room. Another example of her grace is, you notice that I am calling her Elena today, but for about 4 years I called her Elena, and she never corrected me. And then we did a circle before the pandemic came, when we were still doing live work, around a terrible tragedy that she had with one of her students in her school. And she participated in the circle. And so we did an introduction round. And when she introduced herself, I realized for the first time I had been mispronouncing her name for a long time. She still invited me to come and present with her today. So I really appreciate that. I am a lawyer. Please don't hold that against me. I think I'm reformed pretty much. Criminal defense is the work that I did for a long time. And I'm just here to tell you, I came to restorative justice because being in a courtroom every day, I saw a lot of pain. If you're in a criminal courtroom in North Carolina, you are not there because you want to have a good time. You're there because you are commanded to be there, whether you're the defendant or whether you're the victim. and it is not a good day. And I stood on this side looking out. It's kind of when you stand in church and look out. You ever had that opportunity? It looks different up here. I like looking at all of y'all, but it looks different, and it looks different in a courtroom. And I just felt like I was looking at a sea of pain every day and thinking there's got to be a better way. And then I was introduced to the concept of restorative justice, and restorative justice gives us a better way in a lot of situations because it doesn't ask the punitive questions. The punitive questions are what law's been broken, who did it, what does that person deserve? And our schools, I'm glad, are transforming away from disciplinary models and punitive models and more restorative models and keeping kids in school and putting them on a better track. Restorative justice asks three very different questions. Who's been hurt? How have they been hurt? What do they need? And then she's holding up the card. I love it. I love it. And when I heard that, I thought this is the answer to my frustration. I was defending cases from magistrate's court to murder cases. The thing that was breaking my heart the most, though, was kids that were being sent into the court system. And so many of them were being sent in by our schools. And I don't like to utter the word school to prison pipeline because without explanation, that lays all the blame at our feet, doesn't it? And that is not fair. What that recognizes is that if schools are only using a hammer to take care of every problem, you know, if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, and using punitive practices that eventually and pretty much pretty quickly tend to push kids out, we know what's going to happen. Nothing good is going to happen. So that's what it's describing. We realize there are a lot of factors in kids' lives that lead into criminal life, criminal justice, and into the prison system. But in my life, I work a lot in prisons. I work a lot in schools. And I'm going to tell you the stories that we hear are very similar. So that has pushed me to do most of my work in the schools with young people, because I think this is the investment that is worth having. Now, Elena created an outline and she threw me off a little bit because she said I was going to introduce myself and then she wanted me to go ahead and talk about mediation. Is that what you want me to do? Yeah. Okay. Okay. She also said she was going to be brief, and I don't want her to be brief because what she has to say is critically important, I think. So please don't be brief. Mediation is really not the right term, but we use it because it's shorthand that everybody can understand. When you say mediate, you know you've got a facilitator, you know you've got parties, you're working to bring them together to find some sort of resolution. Mediation in the lawyer world is where we're coming to some sort of settlement around something, where nobody's really happy, but you're glad you don't have to go to court. That really is not what restorative practices are, right? We are identifying harm. We are identifying who has responsibility around that and identifying how can we address that and how can we work together to make that as better, you know, as good as possible. So the method that we use is what is more properly referred to as facilitated dialogue. We create relationship with our schools. In Wake County, we have an MOU that we enter into with every school that has a desire to enter into a relationship with us. It spells out some basic responsibilities. One of those things that I think is most important, though, is the confidentiality that we offer. So Elena knows that when I come into her school, I'm not going to record what kids say and walk down her office because it's not about punishment. She wouldn't use it against them anyway. But it's not about punishment. It's about helping them to understand harm and resolve things as well as they can. So we offer confidential processes and schools agree to that. They also agree to offer us a space, a person to facilitate with us, not with us in the room, but to facilitate the process. They send us a referral, digital referral. We set up a file, me and my students, because I do run a clinic at the law school where students sign up to take this work, and I think it makes them much better lawyers when they get out in the world. They go with me. We show up in the school we promise within 2 days of receiving the referral. If a kid has been suspended, they tell us when the kid's going to be coming back, and we want to be there that morning because what we know is the suspension has not resolved the conflict. As a matter of fact, in the world of social media, it probably has expanded. And so many people will be waiting at the door, waiting for those kids to walk back in so they can be entertained again. So we want to be there to start our process. We meet with one child and we basically go through a 4-step process, help them understand who we are and what this is going to look like, let them opt in or out. It always has to be voluntary. We will not force people to do this. If you do, you're not going to get a good result. Step 2, tell us what happened. Step 3, tell us how this has affected you and others. This is the harm. Step 4, once we understand that, what can you and others do to work together to resolve this harm as equitably as possible? Have that meeting on both sides. If we and they believe that we can bring them together for a face-to-face meeting, and I have 2 standards in a safe and productive way, then we bring them together for a face-to-face meeting. When we do that, we usually start by saying, you understand and we understand that you don't have to be here. You've chosen to be here. What is it you would like to accomplish by having this meeting today? And hear from them. And then everything we do from there on as facilitators is try to help them to accomplish the things that they would like to accomplish. Sometimes we need to talk about conflict. Sometimes we never talk about conflict, because the thread that is woven throughout this process is what we call the humanizing thread. What we know is we need to help people make the human connection. And I think that is the reason that we have such low reoffense rates in the cases that we do. Once people can make the human connection, the conflict tends to fall away, and the people that they're sitting with become the most important thing in the room. I think you've been provided with a link to a case that we did at Broughton that we were able to go back and record. And you'll hear me say these things. The conflict tends to be the least important thing in the room, and the people become the most important thing in the room. And I think once they understand that somebody else has a story of pain and trauma that we've already heard about just like they do, it's going to help them to understand the next time they have conflict, that person has a story too. So they are less likely to hit each other and more likely to seek conversation. Another practice we're implementing this year, and Elena's people were the first ones to sign up. Counselors who want to use this method to facilitate dialogue in lower level verbal conflict cases so that they won't escalate to the physical conflict come in, and we're providing training, nuts and bolts training in a classroom. But then when we come to the school, letting them know we're coming and getting them in the room with us so that they can learn on the job how to do this work. And we're expecting to see, Ellen is going to talk to you a little bit about lower suspension rates and arrest rates, and we're expecting to see those continue to come down. So I'm going to let you have it back.
Thank you, John. So as a school practitioner, I like to talk about the impact of those choices of what we've done. So when I got to my current school, we were in crisis around out-of-school suspensions and police charges. We had an astronomical number of students being suspended out of school, and we had triple the rate of the average high school in our district for police charges. That was in 2017. So we decided that we needed to do something systematic to change that, because we knew that those discipline and charges were resulting in a high dropout rate, lots of other factors that were impacting kids' lives. So we very systematically said, all right, we're going to partner with Campbell Law School more intentionally, and we're going to refer kids that have conflict or the kids that have been suspended for physical aggression. And we made sure that people were trained in recognizing it and they knew how to refer. I think that's the linchpin there, is that we made a really strategic process with them, and it worked. So at the end of 2 years, the last suspension rate data that we have pre-COVID, we had a reduction in overall suspensions by 60%. We had the lowest percentage of students suspended for as far back as I could find the data, nearly 15 years worth of school suspension data. And we had a reduction of police charges by 70%. Okay. Yes. Thank you, John. I do want to share that, that strategy was coupled with a lot of other strategies, primarily work around identifying institutional racism, bettering ourselves, building a positive culture for all people, so that it's not just one silver bullet, right? It's a lot of factors at play. I do want to share, I think, more importantly, that in tandem with those reductions in suspensions and police rates, we reduced our dropout rate by 42%. And for the past 2 years, we've had the highest graduation rate in school history. And I can guarantee you that the two acts are related, right? That when we reduce those suspensions and police charges, kids are more engaged and they're more likely to be successful. So those are just some very concrete ways that this process has worked with us. So John's now going to talk about circles, and then I'm going to talk about how circles have been used. And then Deanna has charged us to engage in a closeout today with a circle?
I always get nervous when I know I'm going to have to ask people to volunteer to join the circle, but I got a feeling I got a friendly table right over here. So, as they used to say in the rodeo when I worked it with my dad, when you were going to be next to get on the bull, be getting it on your mind. That's what the band said. I do think that Deanna has already secured about 6 people, but I'm going to ask a few more to join. And to me, it looks like there's a space right here that it might be easy that we can pull chairs into. Because when we do circle, we don't want to have tables between us. We want to be as much with each other as we can. I got somebody over here that is with me all the way. I love it. Yes, sir. Yes. Oh, I absolutely agree with you. And I think it takes a while. And I didn't know that we could make a difference in the Wake County school system because Wake County has about 195 schools. I'm like, how in the world can we make a difference? But it has made a difference. And I'll just jump ahead a little bit. Wake County Schools has gone from my clinic providing all the restorative practices to creating their own restorative practices team that now has 14 members on it. And they're out. They have trained people in almost every school that we have. So that makes a difference. I think that's how we do it. I think culture is a huge difference too. We already got a circle. I am loving this, y'all. I'm loving it. So let me talk a little bit about nuts and bolts of circle. And you notice I'm carrying my teddy bear with me. So already a good example of what a circle should look like. And y'all gonna have to make room for me now. Miss Floyd wants to run this thing. She's got the microphone over there. And I know she can. A talking piece. There you go. Yeah, I've used some strange talking pieces, especially when my law students come out to my house for a cookout. We'll talk about that on another day. Speaking of talking pieces, this is a talking piece. A talking piece is simply an object that you can use in the circle, and it goes around the circle in order. You can't call for it because that would be like what we already do, right? You can't raise your hand and say, give me that talking piece. No, you're going to have to wait and listen. You're going to have to hear from everybody. It gives everybody voice. Talking pieces also have significance. I want to go ahead and tell you the significance of this one so I won't have to stop when we start using it in a few minutes. People look at me funny when I'm a grown man and I walk in a room with my teddy bear. This teddy bear's name is OC. And his name is OC because a man named OC Billings made him. We did circles at the federal men's prison in Butner for about 6 years. OC was in our circle as a participant and then as a mentor keeper for a couple of semesters. He was released, and I'm happy to say that OC has done well, as have all the men that were released from prison that did the restorative circle are doing very well. OC came into the circle one day. He said, y'all, I love y'all. He said, I want y'all to write down your names. And one thing about circle that you love on this little piece of paper that he gave us, we all did that. We handed them back to him. He balled them up like he was going to throw them away. Well, like, wait a minute. What are you doing? That's meaningful. He said, don't worry. I'm making something. He comes back in the next week and he's carrying his teddy bear. He said, I've learned a few things in prison and crocheting is one of them. And I made this for y'all. And all of your papers are inside. The reason that I use this a lot when I'm talking to educators is because I think this is part of what is at stake. As a criminal defense attorney, representing people that I watched in a criminal system, and sometimes they went away, they were excluded from society and families, I think this is what is at stake. So that's one reason I'm investing on this end, just like you are, because I don't want OC to get there. I don't want our kids to get there. Talking pieces are powerful. They empower you to speak when it comes to you. They also empower you to pass if you're not ready. So I don't expect anybody over here is going to do that, but you have the power to do that. We can suspend the talking piece if we reach consensus and circle that we can do that. So if Ms. Floyd says that talking piece is getting in my way, we need to quit. What we're going to do, Ms. Floyd? Are we going to quit? No. I'm going to say, okay, there's been a request to suspend use of the talking piece. How does everybody feel? I'm going to pass the talking piece. If we reach consensus, then we'll suspend it until we feel like we can put it back in. But quite frankly, I think the talking piece is the reason that circle is circle. And so I tell people a lot of times, if you're not using the talking piece, you're not doing circle. You're doing something else and that might be fine, but it's probably not circle. The circle keeper comes in with a plan. I got a plan today. It's going to be about 3 rounds, so it's going to be short. We got a lot of people. It's all up to y'all. Depends on how much you talk as to how short or how long it is. And circles do take time. I heard somebody say one of the complaints is it does take time. I see it as an investment on the front end. Yeah. Okay. I think I've given you enough. I'm going to let Eleanor come back up here and give you some examples.
So we've heard a lot about how circles have been used with students. I just wanted to share a couple examples of how, as a principal, we've used it at a school level with more than just students. So for our staff, every year for the past 4 years, John and his team have come in and trained our staff to do circles. And during the pandemic, our staff actually started a circle process once a month for themselves. So they were feeling very isolated, so they started a monthly circle. Right? So staff got together, engaged in circle, and it was a way for them to connect. So your staff can use circles. Students, I want to talk about a school-wide way that we use circles with students. A couple years ago, we had a really public incident with a very racist incident in our school, and kids were very angry about it, as they should be. And we wanted a space for kids to talk about that incident and how it impacted them. So during our advisory class, we set up school-wide circles where kids could come down during their advisory class and talk about how the incident hurt them and how we could move forward. And we did that over a series of several weeks, and the participation was huge and really helped, in my opinion, in healing. And then I want to share something very vulnerable. The hardest month of my entire career was when we had a student who died by suicide. And it was particularly painful for me because I was grieving the student while managing everybody's emotions, but I was being inundated by parents who were terrified, okay? And I didn't know how to deal with it. So what did I do? I called my friend John and I said, John, I really think we should run a parent circle. And it was very risky, right? And even some of my superiors were like, I don't think that's a good idea. And I said, I need you to trust me that I think this is a good idea. So parents came together and they talked about this fear that they had for their children. And it really honestly got me through the hardest month of my career. Was John facilitating that discussion with parents in a very safe way. So I just wanted to provide a couple examples of how you could do this systematically for healing across the school, not just with kids. All right, thank you.
So I've been told to speak into this microphone if I was going to talk anymore, and I'm certainly going to talk some more. That helped Wake County take an important step in dealing with crisis because they had not been using circle. It was fairly new to a lot of people. When Eleanor made the request, I said yes without asking for permission. And she was getting some pushback, and then I got a phone call and said, I understand you've had a request to do this. I said, yes. They said, you can't. I said, why? They said, because it violates our protocol. I said, well, you need to change your protocol. I'm a lawyer, but I don't like rules. So they scheduled a meeting for me the next day. So I showed up, and Marius Pettiford is our senior director for student service council and student services. He's a great friend. He runs our restorative practice work, and he invited Kelly Leister, who is our crisis management team person. And he said that, and quite frankly, when I showed up, I didn't know who Kelly was. I'd never seen her. I didn't know if it was a man or a woman, quite frankly. And I walked in and I was introduced and we started having a conversation. And Kelly said, I think I like this. How can I see this in action? I said, you can give me permission to do a parent circle tomorrow at Broughton High School and you can come. She said, I'm there. So that's what happened. I do want you to know that Kelly talked to me yesterday about the crisis that is happening in the Wake County school system. She said on average, they will experience about 35 losses a year through suicide, accident, staff death, those kinds of things. We have had 28 this school year. She is just drowning in a lot of ways. Nightdale High School had one Saturday night. And so they have already called me to do a circle for staff, or her staff who are grieving. So I'm looking forward to doing that. I heard some conversation a while ago that circles create their own guidelines and values and how we're going to treat each other. I just wanted to read some of those that we offer in circle before we sit down and start doing this circle. One of those is we ask you to honor the talking piece. And really what that means is you honor the person that is holding the talking piece. Take space and make space. That's one way of saying take the time you need when the talking piece comes to you, while understanding that everybody in this circle is going to need time to answer the prompt too. Listen to understand, not to respond. I tell my law students, you have already been ruined by the time you come to me by those triad people down the hall, because they've taught you to listen to tear down. And I'm asking you to listen to understand, not to respond. That really is the crux of what we ask people to use circle for. Lessons can leave the circle, stories cannot. Another way of saying that is what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. We need to know that when we share and we're vulnerable, we're not going to hear it out in the hallway. And then the fifth one that was a new one for me, I was taught by Kay Pranis, and Kay did not introduce this one, but it was introduced to me when Kay was doing a seminar with other circle keepers, and it said expect and accept non-closure. That's not something we're used to in this Western world that we live in. We think we need to walk in and we need to walk out with a solution. But in circle, we need to say expect and be able to accept non-closure if we don't get there. Okay, I'm going to sit down and lead y'all in a couple of rounds, okay? I brought some more animals with me, by the way. I'm going to invite all of y'all to stand up and give yourselves a little more space. You might need to get behind your chair. One thing that we do in circle is we're always trying to create a safe place for people to be. I heard a gentleman, I heard you a while ago talking about that, and I really appreciate that. We are trying to create a safe space. Ms. Floyd, you're going to need to put that microphone down. You're going to have to use your hands here. We don't start in the deep end by asking people to share your deepest and darkest secrets. I'm not going to ask you that. Don't worry about it. We start by getting acquainted. We start by calling each other's names. We start by getting to know each other in some lighthearted ways. And so we're going to do that right now. This is called group juggle. And what I'm going to do, Ms. Floyd, I'm going to call your name first because I know your name. If y'all don't know each other's names, you're going to have to ask before you throw the animal. Because I'm going to say, Miss Floyd, and I'm going to throw the animal to you. You're going to look across and you're going to call somebody's name and you're going to throw the animal to them. We're going to do that until everybody has had their name called and then you have caught the animal. All right. Round one is a practice round. Round two, we're going to go as fast as we can. So that's when it's going to get real. The way that we're going to know that somebody is eligible to be able to catch the animal is when we get started, I'm going to ask you to raise a hand. If your hand is up, you haven't caught the animal yet. So Miss Floyd, when it's coming at you, you can catch with two hands. And then when you throw it, you leave your hand down. So if a hand is up, they're eligible to catch the animal. Remember who you throw it to because we're going to repeat the very same order in round two. Does that make sense? All right, here we go. That's a good point. We're making an example of you today. And so we talked about this in our planning. How do we do a circle with 70 people in the room? And we don't. So what we do is we choose some guinea pigs and we do an example. And so thank you for volunteering to do this. So that's an icebreaker, a little bit of a getting acquainted. I will go ahead and tell you one of my favorite getting acquainted prompts that I use in just about every awareness piece that I do, educational piece that I do, that we're not going to do today because we just don't have time to do all my favorite prompts. But if we did, I'd have my talking piece and I would say, tell us about your relationship with your hair. There you go. That always happens. Hair? It's a fun thing when we start answering, right? Another one might be, if you had a superpower, what would it be and why? We tend to go, once we're building safety and trust, we tend to begin to get a little bit deeper. Another question that I might ask is, tell us about a person or an event in your life that has helped to form you into the person that you are. But because we're at the end of the day, and I understand you had to evacuate the premises earlier today, is that right? And I thought, where's the worst place to be in a session? The last one when you've had to evacuate the building. But we're trying to make it worth your while. So here's the prompt for today, and I'm going to, did I leave my, yeah, thank you, Eleanor. Thank you. So the substantive prompt, and then we're going to do a closing prompt, is you've been here today, you've been taking in a lot of information. I've only been here since 4 o'clock, but I've heard some really great stuff. What is something that has resonated with you today that you think is going to help you in the work that you do when you go back home? What is something that has resonated with you today?
Eliminating that it's always the EC kids' problem. I think listen more. I think I get really focused on do, and your contribution about listen.
It was an eye-opening chart that was shared where the post-traumatic stress disorder and sometimes diagnosis we get for learning disabled or ADHD have the same indicators, and how much maybe we are not getting to the root cause of what's going on.
You know, I'm always inspired by teachers, and so listening to the panel and all the great strategies. So I think my takeaway is just really thinking about even more strategies for how do we make sure that we're taking care of our teachers and reminding them that self-care is important, but making sure that we create that as a school leader, that we are encouraging that, but creating structures for that to happen as well.
I think just hearing so many different ideas about how people are incorporating SEL and trauma-informed teaching with fidelity, you know, in their schools and in their classrooms. And I loved the idea of a care room, you know, or that, what the time in, or I loved that. Yeah, that was excellent. I thought both of those things.
I think just knowing that we've been through such a really difficult time over the last 2 years, to be able to hear the excitement from teachers and other educators about the great things that are happening in their classrooms and their schools and the pride that they have, and that has been really empowering to me.
And I just feel extremely privileged to be able to share on the behalf of my colleagues. It is a huge privilege to be able to spend a day outside of a classroom with folks who make decisions and outside of my little bubble. And so I just hope that I did my colleagues proud, and I hope that you hear how much we love our children and we'll do what we can for them.
I have to agree with Aaron. I really enjoy sharing something that I actually do in my classroom every day that uplifts my children and grows their brains. And I got the data to back it up. And just knowing that I can share that with all of you, because Maureen told me one of the things that is most powerful for me in this position is being able to share what your decisions that are made here look like day to day for our kids. And I'm glad that I'm able to share this moment with everyone.
I believe it was the reaffirmation of a leadership strategy, a profound kind of mantra that transcends the classroom up into many of the educational leaders that are in this room, and that's just be curious.
Rebird stole mine. I should have sat on the other side. For me, I think that the thing that's really resonated with me is the focus on remaining student-centered, that the kids are the most important thing about public education, and that many times the way that we look at things, we look at it from an adult perspective, and we forget that the kids are the number one thing for us, not only as a state board of education, but as a public education system. And we always have to remember that we're working for them, and we have the privilege to be here today because of them, and we need to remain student-centered in all of our decisions.
So I've got a little, can I go off book a little bit? So at lunch today, as I was coming in, I actually saw students that were out and they're playing in the courtyard, and they were around the door where I entered, and they were kind of peeking in because it's blacked out a little. So you go like this, look inside, see what's going on inside the building. And I said, do you want to see inside? Because you have to have an access card. And they're like, oh my gosh, an adult just spoke to me. And so I used my key card to open up the door. Actually, it's Tabari's key card, if he's still here, because I didn't have my ID on me. So I used his key card to open up. I said, come on, take a peek inside. So there's student artwork in here. So this is where we make decisions about what y'all do during the day. And where are you from? And I got a little bit of their backstory, and it just reminded me of how important the work is that we're doing, and how inspiring and what a blessing it is to see our children in person.
Like I said, I've only been here a short time, but I am so encouraged at what I've heard and who I see in the room. Educators get a bad rap a lot, and it is so encouraging to see so much commitment and inspiration to do the very best that we can do for our kids, which transfers to our families and our communities. And I'm grateful for that. All right, we do openings, we do closings. We're going to close with this. If you could think of that person that has put something in you that you are so grateful for. And so we don't have time to tell their story, but I want you to say who they are to you and say their name. And so I'll start. My brother, Timmy.
My mom, Inez. My father, Henry.
My son, Owen.
My dad, Larry.
My husband, Mike.
My mom, Jane.
My mom, Rita.
My mommy, Laverne.
My children, Dorothy, Gail, and Jeremiah.
My mom, Chris.
My sister, Kelly.
So this is where I stop facilitating and turn it back over to somebody. I'm not quite sure who.
Well, folks, I know the hour it's been long. This has been an eventful day, has it not? And in a way, I think that we all experience a collective trauma, perhaps, right? The unanticipated event that was the evacuation of the building. Again, we experience things differently, right? Depending on where we come from, people are their experiences. And so, you know, that could have triggered all sorts of fear, trepidation, anxiety, uncertainty. And it also forced us to change our flight pattern a bit. And so I think that there's a metaphor in there about how we approach life and most importantly, how we do school, that we need to remain adaptable, that we need to remain responsive to needs. We started out today talking about closing gaps and building bridges and building on that pun of bridges, revisiting our past and forecasting what our future looks like. We heard success stories about things that have been done with school and district leaders and the work that they have done. And again, those were emotional conversations, real raw emotions you saw get activated in those discussions. Okay. So it's not, and again, the students are the center, but I also want to put into the room that adults need to take care of themselves as well. That we are our best when we are whole, and that we give from the overflow. We heard from outstanding educators who are doing this work, who are speaking from experiential knowledge about what needs to happen. We heard about the role of social emotional learning and the neurological responses, and in some cases, the physiological manifestations as well. And then ending, you know, kind of in this circular atmosphere, you know, and tapping into indigenous knowledge, right? Which, you know, even I'm a hip hop culture guy. That reminds me of the cipher, right? You know, you got one microphone, right? It's very similar, right? For those from hip hop, my guy from Detroit, he understands. Okay. So this has been a great exposure to different ways of showing up and different ways of knowing, different ways of building knowledge, and how it is incumbent upon us not to know everything, but to respond, to be responsive to all the different ways that our students show up. And so I'll close by saying this. In the strategic planning committee, we opened up the other day. We had a meeting in preparation for this. And before we began, I said, you know, can we take a moment to do a check-in? There was just a lot happening. And I said, before we get into any business, can everybody just kind of answer? And the question prompt we used was, what are you doing to take care of your mental health? What are you doing for self-care? Right? To channel a little bit of Marshawn Lynch, who has so many quotables, take care of your mentals. Okay. And it took a while before we got to the agenda. But we leaned into that moment, and I try to practice that as a leader of my own organization, beginning with the check-in. And so I want to reverse that a little bit and do a quick check-out. We don't have time to go around the rooms. A lot of people in here. But if I could get maybe, say, 5 folks to tell me, as a result of everything you've heard here, adults, what are you going to do to take care of your own mental health? Can we get 5? Any volunteers? Yes. That's an amazing start. Highly recommend that one. Number 2, a second one. In the garden, doing work in his garden. With the weeks. Of yet or yes? Okay, I'm about to say, everybody got different. Some people need to say no, some people got to say yes, so I wasn't sure. But yet, got you. Y-E-T, of yet, good. 2 more. Liz. Good for you, Liz. One final one before we close out our day one. Yes. I heard that. All right. But in all seriousness, educators, everybody, the mental health, the social and emotional piece, you know, we are the reflection of our young people. And in some cases, we are a picture of what happens when you don't take care of yourself. As we've been told, you got to do this, be an adult. And you realize nobody on this side, like, have we ever come to the revelation? Adults don't know what they're doing either, right? We just need to start taking time to take care of ourselves in this process. So let it begin with us, and we'll come back here and begin bright and early tomorrow. Thank y'all for an amazing first day.